Welcome back to FPL Therapy, the weekly FPL podcast hosted by me, FPL Raptor, where each week we are joined by a different guest. And I'm delighted to say that for Gameweek 17, we have Jian Batra on YouTube. Please do check out his YouTube channel. It's absolutely brilliant. He started towards the back end of last year, but really seriously this season, he's already on over 5,000 subscribers. So that is exactly how good the content is, but also just really refreshing. Someone that I will say is not afraid to sit on the fence as well, which I absolutely love, but just gives out very, very good advice and knows football very well too. So I'll link it down below in the description. Please check out his YouTube channel. But how you doing, my friend?
I'm really, really well, thank you. And I'm delighted to be here. I've been watching it for a while, so it's good to be here.
Yeah, this is one that I've been wanting to do. And we obviously spoke in real life about getting you on because, as I said, I like people that don't sit on the fence. And I'm not pushing you today to say anything controversial. But obviously, as content creators, we're often like, oh, this player's okay and this one's not. But I know especially on Twitter, you're not afraid to say, I think this person's the best captain. And I think that's refreshing as a content creator because then, well, it's on the line, right? If you're wrong, then you're very clearly wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when you're wrong, you just have to take responsibility for it. Realize that as long as it's a good decision, you just move on and it is what it is.
Exactly. If you back your decision and opinion at the time, then you should be able to back it after the outcome, which isn't always easy. This podcast is sponsored by a club. You will know club by now, but we'll do that a little bit later where we'll get our guest, as always, to meet with our agent and see if they can pull a highly rated asset. And we saw last week that didn't necessarily happen. So fingers crossed this week we get a bit more luck. If you are watching on YouTube, please rate 5-star and make sure to drop a comment down below of any kind and drop a like. And if you're listening on audio, please do rate as 5-star. So if you are new to FPL Therapy, as I said, please subscribe. But secondly, what we're basically going to do now is go through Game Week 16, the games that occurred, and have a bit of a discussion around some of the key events and the key players with an eye sort of looking forward. And we've got lots of game weeks coming thick and fast right now. So we want to think about which players we like to bring in and which teams we want to target. But as always, let's start with how our teams got on in Game Week 16. We are recording this on Monday afternoon. So we still have the game on Monday evening. I am all out. You've got one player left to play. And you're having not only a cracking game week, but a cracking season. So you're on 1,004 points at the moment. And you're on 58 points this week with Bowen still to play. So I'll read out your team for audio and then you can sort of talk us through the team structure and stuff. So like me, you've got Sanchez in goal, lost that clean sheet last minute. I was going to say the big haul for you this week, no pun intended, was Lewis Hall. So 15 points there. Gabriel, 9-pointer. And then you do also own 8 Nuri for the -2. The midfield, like I said, you've still got Bowen left to play and he's been in cracking form. So maybe more points for you there. And then the 3 premiums between them, getting 10 points.
Yeah, I know.
I don't think we saw that one coming. And then your front line smashed it. Again, you've got Isak and Jackson, which in all honesty is such a strong position to be in. Most people have got one or the other. And then you've got João Pedro, who has been a little disappointing. So like I said, 58 points with Bowen left to play. We'll talk us through the team, how it's going and how your season's gone.
Yeah, sure. So we'll start with the team, then we can move on to the season. Obviously, we both own Sanchez. When it's 2-0 and we score pretty late on, I'm like, all right, we're cruising, and then ball gets played in behind. I don't think Tosin needs to make the challenge that he does. I don't think he needs to go to ground. He stays with him. He's a strong guy. Probably pushes Mbeumo onto his right foot, and Sanchez saves it. He had a really good game, actually. I know with Jack, you had a discussion about him, but he had a pretty good game. And if it wasn't for that, then who knows? Maybe I'd find myself closer to the top 100k.
I should just add in here right now, you are a Chelsea fan as well. Yeah. So the late goal conceding is probably even worse. But I guess you still won the match, but it must be painful everywhere. It isn't Leicester. Just in my head, is it? That like you do seem to concede late on quite often. Like, it's been at least 2 or 3 times this season where it's been a late goal conceded.
Yeah, for sure. I think we conceded late against Leicester. And also as a Sanchez owner, we didn't get him against Southampton. And then we got 0 points against Spurs.
Oh, don't remind me. It's been painful.
Yeah, it's not been the greatest run since... 12 for him. Then we move on to Aït-Nouri, who's even worse with a -2 pointer. And you know what? Those things happen. I think when Wolves are in such bad form, they're going to concede more often than not, especially against Ipswich. I wasn't even too expecting of a clean sheet because they have some serious firepower. Amari Hutchinson, Leif Davis on their left flank, obviously Liam Delap up top. But now we can move on to things that were more enjoyable. Gabriel, 9-pointer. He had a good game as well. He made a really good block of Takore. So I think the 9-pointer was very much warranted. And then, as you said, Hall. It'd been coming for a while. I think the positions he's been getting into, the overlaps, the underlaps, how often he's been getting forwards, also his technical quality just to deliver. It was a fair 15-pointer for the 1-pointers he's got in the past.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, one of the assists was a bit contentious, but I think Hall owners are probably owed that if you've owned him for a while because like his baseline bonus being so high is an indication that this man is playing well, right? You have to play well to have high baseline bonus. So yeah, I think you deserve that 15-pointer.
Yeah, and on the assist, I saw it a few times. I think he actually did mean it for Isak. It was just a pretty poor cross that we got very lucky with.
I think it's one of those where the intended target was Isak. It was just so bad that it looked like it wasn't his intended target. Yeah, I agree with that. But the midfield kind of disappointing, right?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned they got 10 points combined, right? And at the start of the week, we're all looking at them as captaincy options. We're probably expecting more than 10 points from each of them.
Yeah.
Salah got shot by that red card. Really hurt him. And when we come on to the Liverpool-Fulham game, we can definitely talk about that more. Palmer had a few opportunities to return. You would have expected more than 2, and same with Saka, right? And I'm sure we'll come on to all of that in the match analysis section. Bowen, I'm looking forward to owning tonight. Central attacking players have done well against Bournemouth, and I hope he starts at number 9 in this game in particular. I prefer him at right wing usually, but hopefully at number 9. And then the forward line, like you mentioned, Isak and Jackson have been so good. I actually went Isak to Watkins for Southampton and Brentford at home.
Oh, no.
And then I went back to Isak. It was the plan, and I think I lost 6 points in 2 free transfers. So roughly like 14 points.
Could have been worse, but not ideal, I guess.
Yeah, definitely not ideal after the benching against Southampton. And to be honest, I have a slightly different view on João Pedro. I'm actually quite happy with him. I think 23-5 since Wildcard 12 is not too bad, especially at his price.
Yeah.
And yeah, in terms of the rest of the squad, looks pretty strong. Team value is pretty strong, and it's been a decent start to the season, especially considering no triple captain use and a late wildcard use.
No triple captain and late wildcard. Yeah, I mean, you've smashed it over. I mean, to be over 1,000 points, let us know in the comments if you yourselves have crossed that boundary. Sadly, I'm not at 1,000 points yet, but I am getting there. So I'm at 982 points overall. I had an okay week. At the moment, it's a small green arrow with 53 points. I have no one left to play on the Monday. I think I'm 2 points above my safety score, which means if I lose 2 points overall to everyone else around me, then it will probably go to a grey/small red arrow, but I can take that. I think just overall, it was just, like you said, very disappointing. Like we were looking at those 3 premiums at home thinking each one of those double digits. I mean, some of the other assets did return for us, but yeah, it looked like one of those where a lot of people would get triple digits.
Yeah,
it felt like one of those game weeks.
At least one of them, right?
Exactly. Like I think you as well had, apart from Bowen, but 11 players playing at home for me, 10 playing at home for you. It's just a week you expect a lot. But yeah, anyway, I had Sanchez in goal as well. Very disappointing to lose the clean sheet. But the good thing is, as you've said and a few Chelsea fans have said, Sanchez actually had a pretty good game and made a couple of good saves. The back line was really disappointing for me. So I also had Ait-Nouri. I brought in Trent this week for a 1-pointer. I'm not too stressed. He's not going to return every single week. It's just kind of one of those things. Gabriel 9-pointer as well. As you say, fully deserving of the bonus points. Had a cracking game. And it's very rare, actually, that Gabriel gets 3 bonus points without an attacking return. It's usually Saliba, isn't it?
Exactly. Or Raya sometimes.
Exactly. So it's nice to see him get that 9-pointer. The midfield, I have those 3 premiums as per most people in Saka, Salah, Palmer. I captained Salah, which when it happened after that game, I was like, why have I captained Salah ahead of Palmer? But Salah is inevitable.
Yeah, exactly.
Even in a game with 10 men, it's crazy. And the one that I'm really happy with is I brought in Enzo to fund the Trent transfer. Enzo gets the assist, and we'll discuss him, especially with a Chelsea fan, because he's been looking really good. I will not focus on the fact that I sold Mbeumo to make that transfer. Listen, Brian Mbeumo is that guy. He's on penalties, on corners. We'll talk about him a little bit later, but it's always a risk. And then, yeah, front line of Isak, Cunha, and João Pedro. 20 points between Isak and Cunha. That might be Cunha's last points in my team. We'll discuss that when we move on to the Wolves assets. And João Pedro was just the odd one out of just not performing and not delivering. But I think they could be coming in the future. So yeah, 53 points. I'm about 350k overall. It's honestly a really good point. I kind of feel like as long as you're inside the top 1 million, 1.5 around Christmas, you're in for a very good season. Even if you're like 2 million now, you could comfortably finish top 100, top 50k at this stage. I think if you're outside of that, you might need to start taking some serious risks. But yeah, I wouldn't be stressed right now. I've seen a lot of people like worrying that the season's over at like 1.2 million. You can absolutely claw that back, can't you?
Exactly. And I think if you look at content creator leagues in particular, and they're a brilliant example. They're so close. Like even from top to like 50, there's really not that much in it. So I think there's so much ground to be made, especially with the assistant manager chip that's coming in.
That's a wonderful segue. It's like you're a content creator. It's like you know what you're doing. So we are going to discuss sort of each of the games, obviously starting with that Arsenal-Everton game. But there were 2 things that I wanted to cover first, which sort of go hand in hand, which is the assistant manager chip and the double game week for Liverpool, because it looks like they will be starting in game week 24 for both of them. So I'm going to do my best at summarizing the assistant manager chip very briefly if you've not yet seen. So we knew at the start of the season we had this mystery chip coming, which has now been announced as an assistant manager chip. And this will be available from game week 24 onwards, which is the 1st of February. This chip, when activated, will be active for 3 consecutive weeks. And in that time, you cannot activate any other chips. So you activate the assistant manager chip, and that is active for 3 weeks. It allows you to essentially own a manager. But what you are doing is you're not backing the manager as such. You're backing the team that the manager manages. When the team wins, you pick up some points. I won't go into how many points right now, but when they win, you pick up some points. When they score goals, you pick up some points. And when they keep clean sheets, you also pick up points. The interesting part is that if you back a manager or a team that are 5 places or more lower than the team they're going up against, so they are basically an underdog, they will pick up additional points for the win. So 10 more points for each win. So technically, if you back an underdog over a 3-game week spell where they're playing against 3 really good teams and they pick up 3 wins, they will get you 30 extra points on top of all of the points you get for wins, goals scored, and clean sheets too. To give you a bit of an idea about how overpowered this chip can be, I'm not sure if you saw this post from FPL Focal Oscar.
Yeah, I did.
It's crazy.
Iriola?
It was Glasner, I think, last season.
Oh, yeah. It's like 70 something.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So the best time to play the chip last season would have been Glasner when Palace went on that insane run, double game week 34. You would have got 67 points if you'd have played it over that period when they beat the likes of Newcastle, I think Man United in that time. So in terms of the ceiling that we have with this chip,
huge.
It's looking like it could be 70 points, but that's playing it at the perfect optimal time. And no one probably would have backed Palace to win all 3 of those games. And you might have potentially used a transfer there as well, as we'll discuss in a second. So I feel like 70 is sort of your upper ceiling. But even if you play it slightly suboptimally, even if you play it a little bit safe on someone like an Arne Slot or an Arteta,
35.
You're probably looking at a 30 to 40 point chip. And when you think about the other chips you've got available, you're not getting that from other chips, are you?
No, probably not. I think even if you do an Andy Martin, Kevin De Bruyne triple captain, you're still not getting there. Maybe if your team's in such a bad state that the free hit would improve it so much. But and bench boost maybe, but you're sacrificing other things in your squad just in terms of the budget there as well.
Exactly. I saw someone say, but with a triple captainship, you can get like 90 points, but then you're captaining that player anyway. So you don't gain it. You're getting plus 30 in that case. So it's the additional points you get. Bench boost, as you say, like I think it was when Foster made a penalty save for Watford back in the day. That got me like 36 points, but that was like obscenely high. And even then, again, I had to use transfers around that. So this is one of those where it's comfortably the highest upside chip we've got available to us now, almost overpowered. And if you're having a bad season, you're looking at this now and saying, I could gain 70 points from a chip.
It can turn your season.
Exactly. And it could also, if you play it badly, do the opposite, where you've lost out on a lot of points. The only other notable thing to say around this is that you can transfer the manager out. So you don't have to pick, obviously, a manager for 3 weeks. And it will use your existing budget. So you don't have additional budget, and the managers are going to cost anywhere from 0.5 to 1.5 million. So basically, if you do want to play it around Game Week 24, which we'll discuss in a second, is a high possibility, between now and 24 or going into 24, you're going to need to free up at least 0.5. And if you do want to play it on a slot Arteta, maybe even Guardiola or Maresca, it's going to be 1.5 million.
Yeah.
It's already tough with budget at the moment.
That's a lot. It's like huge.
Especially if you own Haaland as well.
I think it makes the squads with Haaland almost non-viable anymore because it's just very difficult to get there.
Exactly, I think so. So hopefully that makes sense if you were wondering what it was and you weren't quite clear. I think the key thing is it's available from 24 onwards, which then moves us on to the second bit of sort of housekeeping and announcements we've got. So we spoke about last week that Liverpool have a double game week coming up with Everton because of the postponement, and that it was likely to be 24, 25, or 33. We've had a slight leak from a really in-the-know Everton account, which has suggested that actually it's looking very likely for game week 24. So in game week 24, it would be Liverpool facing Bournemouth away and Everton away, and Everton would be facing Leicester at home and Liverpool at home. So I actually think, firstly, I mean, if you've got an Everton asset, like a defender like Mikalenko, you could hold them. I think people are going a little bit overkill with it because really the additional fixture is Liverpool. So you still got the same set of fixtures for Everton.
We can balance this argument because I'm there at the moment.
Okay, so my argument would be, if you've got one, you can keep them, but the additional fixture is Liverpool. Outside of that, it's still the same set of fixtures. But would this make you even tempted to bring in an Everton asset? They're doing quite well.
Yeah, so I was on Green Arrow and I almost outlined what I was thinking of at the moment. So I'll just share that now. So I'm going Deitch 24. And then it sounds weird, right? And then I'm looking to really exploit that extra 10-point rule. So I'm going to move to Lopetegui in 25 if the league table was roughly as things stand.
Who do West Ham have in 25?
They have Brentford at home.
Brentford at home. Okay.
Because at the moment, Brentford are 5 places higher than them, right? And I think West Ham could do a job on them if they pick up some form, especially at home. And then the next week, I'll go Newcastle. So Eddie Howe, who plays Nottingham Forest, who are also 5 places above them. But Newcastle at home are a very difficult side to beat. And they've had a change, and I think they're getting better as well. So that's where my strategy is at currently. And I'll double down by probably bringing in Dominic Calvert-Lewin as well.
Oh, not Dominic Calvert-Lewin. All right, get off the podcast. That's really, so this is what's so interesting about this, because my current plan is slot in 24, 25.
And then, you're going to use it then?
And then move to Arteta in 26.
Oh, interesting. I thought you were going to say 31 to 33.
No, I'm looking at playing it at the same sort of set of games as you, but going in a completely different direction. So basically, if you're still a little bit lost on this, you've got 2 methods you can go. You can either go really high upside and back a team that are lower down the table and playing a team that are higher up the table and really go for that upside of the extra 10 point for the win. or you go a little bit safer because Slot is probably likely to win the games that you're backing him for there. Sure. You'd expect Bournemouth and Everton for him to get the win. And if you bring in Arteta after that, because I think Liverpool plays City in 26, you're backing another good team there. So it's almost like, do you want to try and secure 30 to 40 points, or do you want to aim for that sort of 70? But in the process, you could lose. I will just say, if you back a lower team and they get a draw, that's more points than you would get from backing a better team that get a win.
Exactly, it's an 8-pointer.
Exactly, it's an 8-pointer versus a 6-pointer.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, essentially, it could be the play to back one of those lower teams, but you could conceivably lose all 3 of the games if you get it a little bit wrong. So
yeah, for sure.
I'd love to know what you think of the chip. And what do you think of the chip in general? Are you excited by this? Because it received a lot of backlash when it was first released.
I think it's brilliant. I think last year and the years before, we advocated for a game which was diversified in terms of strategy and in terms of the structures of our team. We've had some very template years recently, most notably like 2 years ago. But this opens it up so much. You could use it in 24, go the aggressive route or the safer route. You could use it in like 31, 33, which a lot of guys are using in, or maybe even like 36, right? With another double. Yeah. So I think it's fantastic for the game. It'll open up strategies. It'll make more for us in terms of content, because now we can analyze football games and like, oh, who's actually going to win the game, right? More usual style of punditry. So I think it's absolutely brilliant, and I'm looking forward to the chaos.
Yeah, I hated it when it was first announced, and I do still have some reservations. It's mainly
Simulvice effect.
Don't you start me. Maybe my issue with it, I mean, it might be a little bit of that, of like, it's changing something that I previously already love, and like, why would you change something that's not broken? But I think it's more like trying to explain it to my family and trying to explain it to friends that just don't care. And like, it's not that difficult once you break it down. Hopefully I've done a good job today, but it still is that extra step of just like, do you want to confuse the beauty of FPL is the simplicity. And there is nothing simple about this. And people will say, well, it's not that hard. You just pick a manager and you pick a team to back. But as we've already started to allude to, there are so many strategies. There are things to think about, like league positioning. You even need to think about, if you play it in like 24, by 26, will that team still be 5 places below that you want? Like, there are so many things that you need to consider here. And also like clean sheet chances and goal chances as well, because you also get points for the goals and clean sheets. So I just think it's great for people like us. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably very engaged and it will benefit you. I just worry that it might drive away some people, but we'll see. The only other question I had is, how would you feel? Let's see how it goes, but about this being a 38 game week thing. So an implementation where you just have 101.5 million to start the season, and you can actually have a manager or team that you're backed every single week. Do you think that would be overkill, or do you think that would increase the amount of strategy that you have, and do you think that would benefit the game?
I think it might be a little bit overkill if we increase the budget to 101.5 and have to manage it every week. Because then how do you do the point scoring system? Do you still leave it as that plus 10 every time? And then I think it becomes a lot less about individual player selection, and we're more so moving to a game which is a lot more football based. So if they want to do that, then fair enough. But I don't think that's what the large majority of FPL users really come to FPL for.
I would agree with that. I'll be interested to see what they do. I think it would depend how it runs, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them scrap it, increase it, or change it in some regard for next season. But yeah, as you say, the one positive thing is it has been a little bit stale FPL.
One thing I would say is that I don't think it's been considered with this assistant manager chip is that it's not a complete certainty that Slot or Arteta wins those 3 games.
True.
And where they don't, there's quite a bit of downside attached to that because you've used up budget, and also you're not even opening yourself up to the upside for the rest of the weeks to capture it. So that's one thing I'd consider as well.
Yeah, something you've also just said there, which I've considered but probably not given enough credit to, is it's going to be an extra 1 million to go for Slot over Dyche probably, which is considerable. Interesting. Well, I'm looking forward to it being available. Like I said, that's from Gameweek 24 onwards, and we are expecting, but not confirmed, that Liverpool and Everton will have a double in 24. Cool. So let's go through each of the games. We'll start with Arsenal 0, Everton 0. Did you manage to catch any of this, and what did you make of it?
Yeah, I managed to catch quite a bit. I thought Arsenal were okay, but a similar story to games they've had in the past this season. Attacking dynamics haven't really clicked from a tactical standpoint, and it hurt them, right? So, for example, Mourinho plays this game, and I'm not sure if this is necessarily the best game for Mourinho to play, in my opinion. I think he facilitates double inverted fullbacks, which helps in some cases, but you're not providing a left centre mid, which really helps Martinelli. You're also getting Havertz that pulls into the 8, and it creates an almost creative over-reliance on Saka. So I think from that standpoint, it's hurting Arsenal. What about yourself?
Yeah, I felt you've worded it better than I could. I've put the balance feels off, but what you said about the dynamics is probably a more eloquent way of saying it. But it doesn't look quite right. And it's frustrating for Arsenal, because in the couple of games when Ødegaard immediately came back, it was like, this is Arsenal.
Yeah, exactly.
It started, and then it suddenly dropped off. I mean, Ødegaard was hooked really early along with Declan Rice. Didn't appear to be injury. I wouldn't imagine it's fatigue. It didn't look like it. He was just having a bit of a stinker, really. And Arsenal in general, I mean, that's now 3 games in the Premier League without a goal from open play. And people are joking about them being like Stoke. But even, like, I think it was maybe Gary Neville that said it, the atmosphere in the stadium, they cheer when there's a set piece.
Exactly.
And then from open play, it's like almost like quiet. Now it's like they're not even necessarily like cheering on the team or expecting much from them from open play. It's almost like become a bit of a meme, like get the ball for a corner. They're playing for corners and they're so good at it. And this is like, you can mug them off all you want and joke about it. They're excellent from set pieces.
Exactly.
And it requires hours on the training ground to be that good. So fair play to them for that. But it would worry me not scoring a goal from open play in 3 games, especially when they've played the likes of United and Everton. You'd expect them to, in the past, Arsenal dominated Everton quite comfortably. So something's not right. Is it Kai Havertz? I don't want to criticize him, but I just think if you slap Isak in that team, that's a monstrous attack at that point.
So for me, I really like Kai Havertz, and I think he offers a lot. And if you look at this as back end of last season, unbelievable, right? I think it's 3rd for output towards the second half of the season. I think he's being asked to do so much. Like, for him to drop as much as he does and have the lack of service he does, it's difficult for him to put up serious numbers, right? And I think anyone would struggle. He also doesn't have a left-hand side that's really clicking. I look at the game against West Ham, right, where they blitz him in the first half and score 5, and they were magnificent. Mourinho doesn't play that game, and you have Rice in the left centre mid role, and you have Jorginho at the base. And I think that type of dynamic, where it's a little bit more pass heavy, is probably better for them. And then in general, that helps them quite a bit. I wouldn't say it's more a Havertz issue. I'd say it's more a team issue and a maybe slightly an Arteta issue. Not to criticize him. But
yeah, I do think he definitely needs some competition at the very least, because Jesus isn't really competition for
sure.
him. And I just think even if that just pushes him a little bit or just offers them a different avenue, because Jesus will do a largely similar role if he will drop deep. And like, I don't feel like they've got a 9 that they can just put in there that will lead the line. Even someone like Chris Wood, like just something that's a bit different, where you just put a 9 up there and give Saka and Ødegaard someone to play off a little bit more.
I think if he was allowed to just be a number 9,
so it's probably the instructions again from Arteta.
And I think you just told him, okay, you can occupy that quite a bit. I remember the Newcastle game. I saw him pulling into the right 8 spot so much. I couldn't believe it. They were basically playing without a 9. And Newcastle centre back didn't really have anyone to occupy. But for example, he's 6'4", right? He's strong, he's quick. You get him running in behind or occupying those centre backs more often, and I think you'll see a completely different Arsenal.
Yeah, so maybe it is on Arteta a little bit. I mean, we obviously don't know as much as the man.
Yeah, exactly,
but,
for sure. 100%.
But there's clearly some sort of issue there. Bukayo Saka did have another great game. So he had 3 key passes, 1 big chance created, 0.9 XGI. I think you feel a little bit unlucky that he got nothing, but that is now 5 blanks in the last 7.
Wow.
And I didn't realise that.
Realize that either,
but I mean, in that time, so the last 5 scores that he's had, there've been 2, 13, 18. So it was the back-to-back hauls. And then he's got 3, 2, 3. And in the last 3 games, he's actually played 90, 90, 90. So he's had the minutes. The thing that we've always said about Saka, and I'm finding it very interesting that this is completely flipped, is he's not very explosive, but he's very consistent. And what we've seen in the last 5 is he's not very consistent and he's very explosive. So I don't know if this is just a small sample size we can't draw too much from. He's definitely found an extra gear this season. The man is comfortably in my Premier League team of the season. He looks wonderful in the absence of Ødegaard. He took on that creative burden. He's not, for me, in the same category as Palmer and Salah in FPL, though. And I don't know if I just don't give him enough credit, but every week I can't bring myself to captain him. I don't know if you feel the same way or not.
So I've captained him twice this season. Once for his brace against Southampton, and once for the 18-point against West Ham. So he's been my guy this season.
And would you be honest? Yeah. Would you say that is some luck, or do you feel like you can identify the games in which Saka will be most effective?
Both. I would say it's definitely both. I think in FPL there's always that skill element. There's also a huge element of luck. And I think honestly, for me, the way I see it, you make your own luck, but luck is a bigger element in this game than skill. You can pick the best team every week. But if Ryan Aït-Nouri is going to get a red card after the game, what are you going to do about it,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think with him, it's more so his teammates. And when the rest of the team's fine, he is going to be explosive. I think for me, this season's probably been my favorite player to watch. He's unbelievable to watch, and he's such a good footballer. I also think the United at home fixture was pretty tough. Like, you guys have looked good since Amorim's come in defensively. Everton, obviously, under Dyche, a decent defensive side as well. So maybe not the best fixtures for him. Going forward, though, if he continues to blank after Palace, so Ipswich at home, Brentford away, Brighton away, which should be more transition-based. If he's going to blank there, then I think we need to have a serious conversation.
Yeah, you make a great point. So Man United, as we saw with City, they're not an easy team to break down.
Very difficult.
And then Fulham and Everton are 6th and 7th for expected goals conceded.
Oh, yeah, and Fulham as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the last 3 games haven't necessarily been that straightforward for Arsenal. So maybe we take everything around the lack of open play goals and Saka not finding his feet completely. Maybe we take it with a pinch of salt. Just on the Arsenal defence, how do you feel about Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, Raya? If you were to rank the Arsenal assets in terms of bringing in a defender at the moment, how would you sort of rank them?
So Gabriel would be one, because I think the box threat you get from set pieces is unmatched to anyone in the league. He's the focus for the best set piece taking team in the world, right? So exceptional and expected minutes as well. Timber for me too. You could even potentially push him up to 1 if I knew there was this security of expected minutes. Because him in that right back role, underlapping, overlapping, the combinations on that right side, so many avenues to points. And he scored from set pieces, right, against Man United.
Absolutely.
And he had a disallowed one against Forest. So I think he's great. I would go Raya third, just because the keepers this year have been decent, but not like, there's not one standout. And then Saliba fourth for me personally, because when Gabriel plays, he's nowhere near as big of a threat from corners.
I'd completely agree with that. Raya, I may put him fourth, and the issue is like Raya doesn't make saves, but as you say, like none of the goalkeepers keep clean sheets and make saves on a consistent basis. I mean, Pickford's been great recently, but largely it's you back the clean sheets or the saves. So maybe you back the clean sheets in this case, and he's quite a cheap route into the defense. Yeah, Timber had 0.31 expected assist in this game, so he's got that open play creativity as well. I'm very much eyeing up possibly going for Timber. You have one Arsenal defender at the moment,
Yeah,
don't
just
you?
Gabriel.
Do you feel like you're missing a second, or are you quite happy with just one for now?
So about a few weeks ago, I would have loved to get in Timber. I would have done a lot to get Timber into my side. I couldn't. I just didn't have the money. I think owning both of them, especially if you're bullish on the Arsenal defense, and his minutes should be fine, right, with Ben White out. And Calafiori's out, so they need him to play at left back if need be. I think is a great option. Who would you bring him in for with your team? Because you've already got Gabriel and Trent. And I was watching your transfer plans on the way here, and you were like, "I'll just rotate the 2 4.5s, maybe." So
we've both already made the same transfer, which we'll reveal a little bit later. It would have been for Aït-Nouri. Now that I've already made a transfer, I don't see an easy route right now. It's just if I decide to remove Trent at some point, maybe I'll go back to it just to saving a little bit more money. Just on Everton, another clean sheet. They are now joint top of the Premier League with 6 clean sheets this season. They did exactly the same thing last season, because I remember I owned Pickford until game week 6 or 7. We removed him, and then he kept like 6 clean sheets in 7 weeks. And they're not the only team. Like Henderson, since I removed him this season, he's gone on. So it does feel this way where some teams struggle to find their feet at first, but Everton have definitely done that. And as we say, with that double coming up, the fixtures aren't great over the sort of medium term, though. If you sort the fixtures by difficulty on Fantasy Football Hub, they are 19th. So second bottom. They're Chelsea, City, Forest, Bournemouth, Villa. I don't see more than probably 1 or 2 clean sheets there. But as a cheap asset, I feel like if you've already got a Mikalenko in there, or if you've got Pickford in goal,
just keep him.
I probably would keep them. I probably wouldn't be looking to sell them at the moment. Cool. Next game. This was an absolute cracker. Liverpool 2, Fulham 2. You managed to catch a bit of this as well. What did you make of it?
Yeah, so impressed by Fulham, especially in the first half with 11 men. So initially, it's like a hybrid 4-5-1, 4-4-2 press. And I love what teams are starting to do to Ryan Gravenberch. We've seen this season. He's had a magnificent season, right?
Yeah.
And when he's been receiving on the half turn in the pivot, just explodes out and has been brilliant in terms of his progression. But now, the first team I saw really do it with Newcastle, where they really hassled him and they jumped on him straight as soon as he got the ball and cut the circulation into him. And Fulham did a similar thing with Andreas Pereira sometimes being in a 2 up top, but he also was like what I'll call a floater and stayed quite close to Gravenberch, which meant especially when they went down to 10 men, Van Dijk was hitting more diagonals into Salah. And against a physical fullback like Robinson, it's not the easiest thing to do, right? Obviously, they're 2 of the world's best, so it's all right. But it's cutting their circulation and making their progression harder. So I thought in that sense, Fulham were really good. Another thing I noticed was that they went long a lot more than I expected to into the channels. And a lot of teams against these better sides just look to transition. They don't have, like, say, the best transitional weapons in their attacking unit, especially with the Dharma on the bench. So they go long, they try and win those long balls with Jimenez linking, and he's so good at that. And Harry Wilson and Iwobi were quite fluid. And they caused Liverpool, I'd say, quite a few problems. Marco Silva spoke about it after the game. If the final pass was better, the final action, they really could have hurt Liverpool in that first half. So I was really impressed. And just in general, they've been magnificent this season.
Yeah, some great info there. I mean, from a defensive perspective, so they're currently sitting 8th actually now for non-penalty expected goals conceded. They're 14th for non-penalty expected goals per 90. So by all accounts, a very solid defense and kind of a middling to lower half attack. That's been where they've maybe struggled a little bit. It's just in terms of scoring goals. But we see here, even with the 10 men, I think before that, they already scored the goal. They were already looking very good. So they're by no means a bad attack. We've already both brought in a Fulham asset. So we'll both admit now that we transferred in Robinson last night. That's because Aït-Nouri was falling, although that didn't affect my selling. Did it affect your selling price?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've saved yourself 0.2. Yeah. I've saved myself 0.1, but I knew I wanted to get rid of Aït-Nouri anyway with the suspension. Robinson, with the fixtures coming up, especially Southampton at home this week, even though they're going to have a new manager bounce, I still feel really, really happy with that. 6 assists already this season. He's had 37 and 35 starts in the past 2 seasons as well. So he's played over 3,000 minutes in back-to-back seasons. He started every game this season. He's a minutes monster. He's a fitness monster. Like, you rely on him every single week. It's very rare that a left back plays that good of a minutes and gets injured, especially when they're so marauding. Like, he gets up and down a lot. He's a player that I'd love Man United to sign, but I don't think he'd want to join us particularly. But
he would be great for you. Obviously, if Amarin, he likes inverted wing backs in the sense that the right footer plays on the left. But if he was willing to have a left footer on the left, what a player, right? And I think he's a wonderful embodiment of Fulham, right? One thing that they boast is a huge sense of physicality. And that's one reason they've been so good from a defensive standpoint. And he is just right at the top of that. Like, there's not many left backs that are harder to come up against. And you saw how against Saka, right? Sometimes I remember one time Saka had a bit of space on him. He closed him down and he took the ball and put him on the ground. It's just a brilliant fullback.
It's very rare that you get a fullback that's as good going forward as they are defensively. And there's not really a weak part of his game, particularly. He's quite well rounded. And like I said, with that 6 assists, that goes to show that his delivery is also
Is it 6
excellent.
this season?
6 assists in the Premier League. I know. I mean, obviously 4 before this game, but still 6 in total is crazy. So he is the standout replacement, I think, for Aït-Nouri. That isn't to say that there aren't other options, especially when we move on to Bournemouth. We'll discuss there are some other assets you can go for, but with the fixtures that they've coming up, I mean, they're sensational. Again, if you order it by fixture difficulty from 17 till 21 on Fantasy Football Hub, they're top. Southampton, Chelsea in 18 is not ideal, but if you've got a team like mine, you've got Rico Lewis, you can play against Everton, or if you've got someone you can rotate, then it's Bournemouth, Ipswich, West Ham, Leicester. I mean, it's a great run of fixtures for Fulham. Clean sheets haven't necessarily been there to go with the defensive data, but I think that's largely luck-based. As long as the data is strong and they're not conceding too many chances, then I'm not too stressed bringing in a defender from that team.
Yeah, I think that's a case across the whole Premier League now, right? There's so much quality in the league. Like, even for these little split moments, and Salah epitomizes that better than anyone. Doesn't necessarily have to have the best game. Give him a moment and he'll hurt you. And there's so much quality in the league now. Look at West Ham. They're like 15th. They have like Bowen, Paquetá, Kudus. So it's ridiculous how high the quality is in the league.
Yeah. I want to get your opinion on, because you don't have Cunha. We'll discuss Cunha a bit later. As I'm just recording this, we don't actually know if there's going to be a ban, which is very frustrating, but I'll check Twitter when we move on to make sure there's not been an announcement during the podcast. But I obviously might be needing to replace Cunha this week, and the standout feels like it should be Raul Jimenez. With the fixtures we've just spoken about, good returns on penalties, still first choice number 9. It's the minutes that worry me, because outside of that, there's nothing bad about Raul Jimenez for me. He's just a class asset. He's very cheap, 5.5, but his minutes are 72, 74, 70, 77, 8, 10, 78, 67. So he's averaging around 65 to 70 minutes. He's not had more than 78 minutes across the last 7 games. Is he still a possible transfer in, or would that put you off enough, do you think?
I echo you in every sense. What a player. Brilliant player. Had a really good season. Great fixtures. Great team. But we're so big on minutes now, and especially considering how hyper-competitive FPL is. And even that forward category is hyper-competitive, right? How many options have done so well throughout periods in the season, especially at good prices? I find it somewhat difficult to justify when the likes of Chris Wood exist, or if you can afford it, to go from Cunha to maybe an upgraded Mateta, who I know you like, and I'm sure we'll come on to, or even a Jackson, assuming you think he doesn't get rested or benched, or he didn't get injured when celebrating. So for me, I'm probably steering away from that now. But if you're willing to take the expected minutes gamble, I think it's fine.
It feels like one of those, it's going to be really obvious in hindsight. It's going to be like, well, it doesn't matter if he's a minutes risk. He had Southampton at home and he's got a great run of fixtures. Or it's going to be one of those, well, of course, Muniz could get a start against Southampton at home, which is my worry, that if they're going to give Muniz another start, and by the way, he came off the bench and scored and looked pretty good, well, this is the game to do it. You're not going to do it against Chelsea. You're not going to do it against Bournemouth. They're 2 really tricky games. I don't think it's a particularly good game for Muniz Ipswich, right? That game suits Raul Jimenez more for me. So there's no upcoming game here, really, I think, that you give Muniz other than Southampton. So that would be my concern.
The only thing is new manager bounce. We've seen it so many times.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah, that as well. So I want to be able to bring in Raul. I enjoyed owning him early in the season. I think he's a great asset, but the minutes put me off slightly. Who else? So on Liverpool, I think Salah was, considering the 10 men, very, very good once again.
Exactly.
That moment of magic, that assist. Salah's assists this season have been stupid, exceptional.
So good. And it's just every week, right? Yeah. It's every single week. When I see he finishes on 5 points, I'm like, all right, finally I'm going to beat him this week, right? He still manages to win. Even when he got the assist, I was just laughing to myself. I was like, take a break for 1 week, mate.
Yeah, I know. You often see in FPL like an assist and then you watch it and you go, how did they get an assist from that, right? It's like a deflected shot, or it's a sideways pass and someone scores an absolute thunder bastard from 30 yards. Every assist with Salah just feels magical. Like it's a beautiful little outside of the boot cross, or this one, which is the pinpoint cross to the back post. So Salah's brilliant. If you don't own Salah still, get him. We'll discuss captaincy at the end, but very tempting against Spurs this week. Trent,
Sorry. I was going to say they were pretty good with 10 men as well.
This is true.
Like even when they played almost like a 3-3-3 and Gravenberch had to slot in, they were still very comfortable on the ball. They held possession a lot, and they're just a super impressive side at the moment. I think Konate is a big miss. But aside from that, they look pretty good. And if they don't get injuries, and I thought Szoboszlai had a good game as well, if they don't get injuries, they could run it all the way.
I think so. And we've just sung Fulham's praises for like 5 minutes there. And the fact that they've been able to do that against Fulham, like Fulham made Arsenal struggle for large spells as well. Yeah. So with 10 men to put up that performance, I think was very impressive. Trent did have a quiet game, created one very small chance, one key pass, was quite deep. I wouldn't worry right now if you own him. I mean, give him a few more games. If you don't own him, now is probably not the perfect entry point anyway, so you can sort of reassess. One man that I am very interested in is Diogo Jota.
Oh, okay. Streaky.
Yeah, very streaky, very spicy, very risky. There's a couple, the things putting me off, right? He's got 11 minutes off the bench. He's been injured since like Gameweek 7 or whatever it is. He's been out for a while. He's got an awful injury record, really, in recent years. How many minutes does he get? Especially with Diaz being very comfortable as the 9 under slot.
The thing.
Gakpo looking good. Darwin's on 4 yellows, so there is a chance he gets suspended, which might increase Jota's minutes for that one game. But, I mean, going into this period, he's only 7.2. If you did want to take a punt, I think he plays Leicester on Boxing Day, which just feels like the spiciest hat trick.
Feels like a Jota type of fixture under the lights.
Yeah, it's Leicester in Gameweek 18, then West Ham, then United, and he performs very well against Manchester United in the past. So the upside feels there, but the minutes worry me. And I don't know, especially with this Liverpool double coming up, I don't want to take up my third Liverpool slot. Maybe if you've got a couple, and I don't want to take it up because I want slot. It feels like a very weird thing to say. I want to leave my third Liverpool slot open for slot. But yeah, I think if you've already got 2 Liverpool, maybe not worth the risk. Any interest for you, or are you more keen on like higher ex-mins players?
So at the moment, yeah, higher expected minutes players. I think you make 2 very good points. One, the fact that Diaz is comfortable at 9. So now not only is his competition is Darwin Núñez, who's an £85 million asset, and you don't really want that to sit on the bench and rot. Yeah. Even from a business standpoint, let alone a footballing one. But like you said, you've got Diaz at 9 as well to take minutes off. And then I think you make a great point that we have to think about Gameweek 24. It's not that far away because the fixtures are so congested at the moment. And you will potentially want Arnie Slot as a third. So then you'll have to restructure maybe 1 or 2 free transfers. And those free transfers could be so precious in that period, especially if you want to move managers as well as players. So yeah, I'm probably going to steer away due to expected minutes. But as a 1 week punt, if you have huge conviction in one fixture like Leicester, I think it's a decent option.
You make another good point there. So I didn't even think about that. Like going into 24, regardless if you want to play the assistant manager chip or not, you've got a double game week. There's a fixture swing around that point.
Yeah.
And you're going to want to maybe move around Liverpool assets. So regardless of what your plan is, you probably want to approach 24 with 3-4 free transfers if you can. So using 2 to potentially bring in and take out Jota, as well as other issues you're going to have to sort, like random ones this week, like Aitnery getting suspended and Cunha maybe getting banned. Like those are 2 unforeseen things that I didn't plan for. So yeah.
I think you make a good point about the fixture swing as well. And I hadn't thought about that, but I was looking to sell Isak in 25. That's around the time that we're going to play that chip, right? Potentially. And the last thing I want to touch on that Liverpool game is Trent's a really interesting prospect because you talked about his entry point and Spurs away is pretty difficult. And I should have looked at the fixtures. And from a defensive standpoint, I don't think they were amazing. It included like West Ham, Brentford away, Man United as well. And I think it's definitely an interesting discussion to be had there. Do you actually need a Liverpool defender, especially when they're without Konate?
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, I said this 3 weeks ago and I got a little bit of hate from Liverpool fans, but I said at that point that Arsenal is still the best defense in the league for me.
Yeah, I would agree, especially without Konate.
3 weeks later, I think they are the best defense. So I feel like, you know what, if you were sat there with Gabriel Timber and Lewis Hall or something like that,
you're laughing.
Yeah, I wouldn't be that desperate to bring in Trent, right? Yeah. I'd be pretty happy you sat there with those 3. But at the same time, all you need is, like, if Liverpool kept a clean sheet against Leicester, and let's say Trent hopefully starts, and you wouldn't be surprised if Trent comes away from that game with 15 points. Yeah, and I think at that point, it's a completely different discussion. So, yeah, I don't think you need a Liverpool defender, especially without Konate, but I also still don't think they're a bad buy. I was sit on the fence a little bit.
100%. I was very high on it initially, getting Virgil van Dijk, but my interest has cooled slightly.
I would agree with that. Cool. Newcastle 4, Leicester 0. This was an absolute battering, honestly. Since Rude's come in, they've conceded over 70 attempts on goal in 3 weeks.
That's crazy.
And I don't think he's a bad manager. I don't think they're necessarily playing awfully. I just think the quality of their team just isn't there. And I think it's going to take a while for Rude to instill something that gets them going. And I think even at that point, like even when he was in charge of Man United for a few games, it was very attacking, but very like defensively fragile, I would say it felt with Rude in charge. So yeah, I think Leicester will continue to be a team to target. I'm just going to sing the praises of Alexander Isak.
Go ahead.
I mean, he's sensational. I love it. I'm going to discuss his data in a second, but I just urge anyone that's not watched him play recently to watch, because it feels like, I don't want to say Thierry Henry because I don't want to upset Arsenal fans, but on that ball, you know, that like tall player that just glides and drifts. And
a similar stylistic nature.
Exactly, very stylistically similar. He's just, when he gets the ball, I can't help but just like, I hold my breath. I sort of pay attention. It's not just because I own him. He's just got that aura on the pitch. And what I've been so impressed by is his play outside of scoring goals. Like his link-up play, his creativity. He created 2 big chances in this game.
Both for Murphy.
Yeah, exactly. And his expected assist has been through the roof for forwards. Like if you compare him to like a Jackson or a Haaland, and I know that's not their role in the team, but he's not only a goal threat, he's got that creativity. And a criticism I've had of Cunha previously is I don't want him to be creative. I want him scoring goals, but he's actually like, I'll do both, right? So he's just got everything. I mean, you tell me what you think about it. I mean, it's that we both own him, but I see him as a top 5 asset in the game quite comfortably.
Oh, wow, okay.
Along with those 3 premium midfielders.
Yeah.
Salah, Palmer, Saka. I would have Isak in there, taking into account price.
Yeah.
I don't know who I'd have as the 5th, but I would put him very closely behind those 3 for me at the moment.
I think that's actually a fair point, because when you consider the forward landscape at the moment, it's probably been stronger in weeks gone by, but not at the moment, especially with Haaland and Worcester and Wood slightly lower, given the fixtures and the price as well. Isak's definitely higher. I understand what you mean with the Thierry comparison, because there's a stylistic nature. There's also the same bodies, almost like thin upper bodies, long legs. So I do get what you mean. We'll start with Leicester, right? Because you started on them. Against West Ham, they might have won 3-1, but they got battered for a lot of the game and they conceded a lot of chances. I was actually fairly impressed against Brighton. Brighton were quite compact in their attack aside in terms of their front 4. And then Tariq Lamptey and Estepinian went wide. And they were compact enough in the middle to deal with that, to the extent that they weren't conceding a bucket load of chances. But without Samara and Ndidi, I had a feeling it was going to go poorly. And
that's true.
It did. I was watching some of the game, and like even in the 4-4-2, there was just a real lack of compactness. Joe Linton was finding himself between the lines, and that really shouldn't be happening as much as it did. And yeah, Isak was great. Because like you said, it's not just the fact that he's scoring goals, but what he's also doing is he's stretching the last line. He's dropping in to an extent when need be. He's linking so well, and that's so good from an FPL standpoint, because we now have so many avenues to points. The other thing about Newcastle is, for a lot of it was Tonali at the base and Bruno G higher. Now, when Bruno G's got into those positions, given his quality, he's helped Newcastle a lot, but he's also returned as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if he becomes an FPL asset for some to consider. The price is slightly awkward at 6-1, but in this role, I think Newcastle will definitely see themselves perform better attacking-wise. And not just that, but also the left-hand side dynamic, right? You've got Lewis Hall capable of underlapping, overlapping, and has the license to get forward, whereas Liverpool will sit a little bit more. Yep. You've got a runner and a supreme athlete in Joe Linton to help defensively and mitigate against those transitions. And then you've got the superstar in Gordon on the left, back on his sides. So I wouldn't really be surprised at all if Newcastle start to see a bit of an upturn, and quite looking forward to owning their assets.
I'll let you talk about it a little bit more, because it must have been amazing. Lewis Hall, 15 points.
Yeah.
So what do you make of him as an asset, especially for those that, let's say, don't own him? Is he still a good asset to bring in? I mean, the fixtures coming up I'll get your opinion on it, because I'm not really sure. Like, they're okay. Ipswich, Villa, United, Spurs, Wolves. They're certainly better for attackers. I think we'd both be pretty happy to admit that. But do you still see Hall as a good transfer in, or do you think at this stage you've sort of semi-missed the boat?
I think it's one in isolation that's probably not the best when Robinson and Munoz exist. But if you are, or you do have a team with the structure whereby you can rotate those 4.5s, then he becomes a very attractive prospect, right? So Robinson, Munoz, Hall as a rotation would probably work wonderfully. So I think in a rotation, yeah, but if you had to play him every single week, I think you can't be expectant of the highest ceiling from that, given the fixtures he has, right? Like you mentioned, Man United, Spurs.
Spot on. I think this week I wouldn't be surprised if he outscores Robinson. I think that he's got a really good matchup. But yeah, if you have to start one for every game over the next 6, then it's got to be Robinson ahead of him for me.
Yeah.
He's just really good though. And again, that baseline bonus, as soon as he had that assist, he was right up there alongside Isak with just a 1 assist. And with the 2, to be above Isak with a goal and an assist, we know Isak's very good for baseline bonus. It goes to show again, because of all of the actions he does. He had 5 key passes in this game, which is miraculous for a defender. Another player that had 5 key passes was actually Anthony Gordon. Got 81 minutes, got the assist. Any interest there? If someone still isn't that keen on Brian Mbeumo, or they want to make a midfield transfer, would you be tempted by Gordon?
If you think he consistently plays on that left wing, now that he had his rest against Brentford as well, I can get on board, because he was so good. And when he's been on that left flank, just in general for Newcastle, he's been so good. He's also somewhat streaky in the sense that when he gets going, he really gets going. He's got goals in him. So yeah, I can definitely get on board with it. And also the games, like for example, Spurs, maybe not the best from a defensive standpoint, but you know it's a game where when they press you high and you play through, that's good for him. And there'll be a lot of transitions. That's good for him. So he can definitely get some points in this run.
Yeah, I like it. I'd be happy bringing in Newcastle assets. I do think you've missed the best fixture, of course, which was this week. But still, especially for the attackers Gordon and Isak, I quite like the next few fixtures, the likes of Villa, United, Spurs. They're not fixtures that worry me. Like, I still expect Newcastle to score goals. And I'm hopeful for Newcastle's sake and from an FPL perspective that there's less streakiness with Newcastle. Because the big issue is they've been a bit like Spurs this year, where you just don't know which version of Newcastle's going to turn up. If the version of Newcastle turned up this week, then they're going to continue to offer a really good value. The next game was Wolves 1, Ipswich 2. Did you catch any of this?
So a little bit less of this. Probably the one game that I have too much insight on. What I will say is that I like things that I've seen from Ipswich this season. I like McKenna's almost personality within management to be quite flexible compared to where other managers haven't this season. And I think adaptability has definitely been rewarded, and the sense of pragmatism, right? You look at Nuno, for example. Forest are flying, and one of the reasons is he's been willing to be slightly different and not as maybe attacking as others.
Yep.
They've got some really good players in Liam Delap. What he did to Nelson Semedo for the first goal, he ruined him. I mean, it was known that he's a huge physical presence, right? And he really put that on display. I like Amari Hutchinson's ball carrying, and I think that helps a lot in the side. So yeah, I actually quite like Ipswich, and I think they could give some teams a run for their money in terms of staying up. In terms of Wolves, I don't really have too many positive things to say, so I'll just leave it alone. What I also, though, as someone who hasn't owned him for the whole season, Matthias Cunha is such a brilliant footballer.
Yeah.
And for you guys who own him, I think you're very deserving of the points, and almost happy that you got the 9 points, because you didn't deserve for him to walk away from these two fixtures with only playing one and elbow to replace.
So I guess the first piece of news is Gary O'Neill has been sacked. Apparently the manager announcement is expected to be either today or tomorrow for Vitor Pereira, who currently manages Al Shabab in the Saudi Pro League, who are currently 6th. He's not young by any means. He's managed 10 professional clubs. I think his best spell was probably for Corinthians, looking through some of the comments on social media. I'm not acting like I know this guy in a lot of detail. One of the issues that he's had in his past is he's only, I think, in his early 50s, and he's already managed 10 teams. Apparently, he kind of goes to any team quite quickly, and they call him like a journeyman, like he goes from one team to the next. So
that's a polite way to put it.
Yeah, I think Wolves will be hoping that he doesn't do that here. They kind of need someone to sit in for a good few years and just stabilize the club. So let's see how he gets on. He doesn't have a great sort of career backlog to go off, but that might give them a bit of a new manager bounce. In terms of the two key things to talk about, the first is obviously Aït-Nouri picked up, firstly, the yellow card that led to the suspension, because he then got booked again, leading to the red card after the game. I don't know if people realize this, but that means that he gets suspended for Gameweek 17, but he then goes back to 4 yellow cards as well.
Yeah.
So he's now not only suspended for 17, which means he misses a game, but he's also then still on the 4 yellow card tightrope, where he might then get suspended once again when he comes back in 18. So Aït-Nouri's a sell. The fixtures aren't there. He's been getting 0 and 1 pointers anyway. This week's a -2. Just absolutely get rid of him. We've obviously both brought in Robinson. Are there any other assets that stand out to you? Let's say below 5 million. Let's say you can't get to Liverpool and Arsenal defenders that you'd think about replacing Aït-Nouri with?
So there's one that I really like, and maybe we're going a little bit early, but to be fair, it is. I think he might be suspended actually, but so for the week after, Munoz.
Yeah, so he's suspended for Arsenal, but it was Arsenal anyway.
Exactly. And I think I'd rather, if like you were going to lose the money in Aït-Nouri, I'd rather just bring him in anyway and then just keep him on the bench if that's a possibility and it's most optimal for your team. That's the one guy I'm really looking at getting. I mean, the role he's playing, the way Palace have improved, what he was showing towards the back end of last season, the form he's picking up, that's the one transfer I really like. Or even like a cheap route into defense, like a Trevor Chalobah, I think is like 4-3, 4-4. He scored a couple goals this season as well from set pieces.
Yeah, I've not even really considered Chalobah. Has he been playing good minutes?
Yeah,
he's 4-4 at the moment. Yeah, so he started every game since game week 7.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so he's a possible option. You've obviously got Howson, the centre-back for Bournemouth.
Yeah.
Let's see how he gets on tonight, but he's shown some real attacking threat. And if Anderson's back at 4.2, we didn't even discuss him.
Is he 4.2 now?
Anderson's 4.2.
That's so interesting with that fixture.
But we just, the quotes that we've had around whether he's going to be back or not is difficult. And obviously, if he's not back for the Southampton, it's then going into Chelsea. So
19, pick up.
Same exactly the same there. So I think we've actually got a few good assets now below 4.5. So if you do need to free up the funds, then that's a possibility. I really agree with the Munoz shout. We'll discuss Palace in a second, but if you can either bench him this week or wait until 18, 19, then he's going to be top of my list. I'm looking at Rico Lewis to Munoz in 19 for me, because that man is getting in the box way too often for a defender. So I've just checked Twitter whilst we've been talking about that, if you're wondering what I'm doing on my laptop, just to see, have we got an announcement on Cunha? We are still at 1:30 p.m. on Monday. There's no announcement. I would be supremely surprised if Cunha doesn't get banned for this. And I would be disappointed. And I want Cunha to not be from an FPL perspective, but you can't act like that on a pitch and get away with it. And as much as I see the humor of stealing someone's glasses, as someone that wears glasses, it's
wrong.
It's not funny.
It's wrong.
And also it's the nature of it. So if you didn't see, he was arguing with an Ipswich member of staff. Then when the guy turned his back, he elbowed him quite hard in the back of the head. Firstly, that's really extremely dangerous. Obviously, elbowing someone in the back of the head. It's why in boxing you don't punch someone in the back of the head. Like it's really quite dangerous. And obviously the guy's got hit in the back of the head. He's then turned around and Cunha has grabbed his face and glasses and ripped the glasses off his face. It's not like he just pulled them off. So I reckon he's getting a big ban. I reckon that could be as much as sort of 5-7 games. I don't think you can sit there and give him a 1-game ban. I guess there's two possibilities. One is that he doesn't get the ban, maybe. Yeah. And I would be extremely surprised.
Lucky to get away with
exactly. The second one is that maybe it takes long enough for them to decide that he might get the Leicester game. I highly doubt that will be the case because you're then letting a player play that you know you're going to ban. So what I'm going to go off right now, and apologies if you already know this at the time of listening and watching, is that Cunha's going to be banned. And I think it'll be a hefty ban. And I think for that reason, we've probably got to look at replacing him. So going off that basis, I mean, I know you don't have him. Let's say that you can't upgrade. Right, let's say you can't get to Mateta, Jackson, Isak. Let's say you can only go his price or down. Are there any standout options for you to replace Cunha?
So I think you have to prioritize something in terms of one variable at least. Is that going to be expected minutes? Because if it is, then Chris Wood looks like a very good option, especially considering his form. If you are more interested in the fixtures, then I think Raul Jimenez looks really good. Now, I know you said you can't upgrade. I think there's only like a 0.1 difference. So I'm going to go there. Mateta. If he can keep the minutes, I think he's a wonderful option. The only issue with him is there's constantly Eddie Nketiah, who they spent good money on, knocking on the door. Now, yeah, sure, he can play on that right side, but can you drop Ismail Assar when he's just put up 2 goals and assists? No, not really, right? Yeah. So I would say I would love Mateta if it was good minutes. If not, I think I'd probably go safe again and go Chris Wood because I'm just slightly concerned that Muniz is going to get a start, and if not, he'll take 20 off him every game in terms of Jimenez.
I would agree with that. Let's actually move on to the Forest Villa game then, because we can discuss Chris Wood in relation to that. So Forest 2, Villa 1. Forest are now absolutely flying this season, and they're just performing at an incredibly high standards. Nuno's done an incredible job. Defensively, they've been unbelievable this season. Offensively, they've struggled a little bit. They have been over-reliant on Chris Wood, but they actually accumulated 1.74 XG in this game, which was one of their highest of the season. So they actually had a much better game. Obviously, Chris Wood, outside of the disallowed goal, didn't do much, but that is what Chris Wood is. Like I've sort of come to terms with, like, I'm not a massive Chris Wood fan, and every episode I seem to slate him. I think I'm just expecting things from Chris Wood that he's not. He's not going to be doing things that Isak's doing with the ball, but that's not his job. He stands in the box, makes incredible runs, and he finishes the chances he gets. And once again, he finished a 0.93 XG chance from 3 yards out. It was inches offside. And in all honesty, I don't think it was offside.
It looked so close.
The lines looked a bit dodgy to me. And from the eye, and I know the angle doesn't always tell the full picture, that looked very on the side to me. So I'm very glad it didn't obviously go ahead because he's a big rank threat for me. It just goes against every fibre of my being to bring in Chris Wood. But when I look at the other options, like Raul Jimenez is a minutes risk. Wissa doesn't have great fixtures. Even Nilsson, touch and go fixtures, but doesn't have the penalties that Chris Wood has. His minutes seem to be pretty good. Every single asset's got something that's slightly wrong with them. And then I come back to Chris Wood. He's got okay fixtures. They're sort of middling. On Fantasy Football Hub, technically, apparently they're bottom, but I don't see that.
From an attacking standpoint, they're probably not as bad.
Exactly, like Brentford, Spurs, Everton, Wolves, Liverpool. The Brentford, Spurs and Wolves games are fantastic. I do agree that the Everton, Liverpool ones aren't, but Forest will score in those games, and it's going to be Chris Wood a lot of the time. So I don't mind the fixtures. The minutes are good. He's got the penalties. He's just a good finisher as well. Like he's clearly he's performing above his XG, and I don't think that's a surprise. I think he tends to take his chances well. He's excellent in the air, and we know with XG that the headed chances are often quite low XG, but Chris Wood will take them quite well. So I'm so sad to say it, but I feel like he is the standout option if you are going a little bit cheaper. I will just re-emphasize, if you've got Cunha and no Isak, I'd be willing to sell pretty much anyone in your team to go to Isak, apart from those premiums and maybe like an Arsenal defender. But outside of that, if it's selling Mbeumo to get Isak in, as much as I think Mbeumo's fine and we'll discuss him, get Isak at all costs for me. I think he's that good. Would you agree, or do you think you'd still go a little bit cheaper?
Yeah, so I agree in the sense that if we're going to hold Isak all the way until game week 24, we've just had 16, so we've got 17 to 24. That's a lot of game weeks to not have an Alexander Isak. And when you're going to get him in, you may as well get him in early, right? For this fixture on, like, for example, Ipswich away. With Wood, he's fantastic in his zone. He's not what I would describe as a modern day striker. He's not channel running a lot, not stretching the line in, doesn't drop too much, doesn't drop in too much to help in that sense. Does a little bit, but he works hard off the ball. And in his zone, he's magnificent, right? He's so smart, so intelligent. His movements are great, a great finisher, knows where to be and when to be there. So from that standpoint, I think it's absolutely fine. What I would say with Forest is I love the job that Nuno has done this season. I think it is one of the best jobs I've seen in a while, because he hasn't embodied what so many managers have, in the sense that we're going to play this way and it's going to be super attacking and aggressive, and we're going to impose ourselves on other teams regardless of the quality. He hasn't done that. When he went away to Anfield, he plays 4-4-2, but he drops both his wingers, brings them on later in the game for that transitional threat and counter-attacking ability, but he plays 2 centre midfielders in those wide areas, right? And he's been willing to do that. Even against Forest, he drops the right winger and plays Dominguez in there as a natural centre mid as well. So I think because they have such a stable base, and they're so good in settled possession, which is almost where he thrives as opposed to being a transitional weapon like other strikers, he's always going to be able to generate chances. And whilst he doesn't need too many, he'll still be able to put up the numbers.
Yeah, I think it was an above average FPL I was listening to this morning. They were like, it just feels very simple and obvious. Like they set up a team, Chris Wood up top, score goals, like defend well.
Exactly.
It's obviously not, and there's a lot that's gone into it, but it works incredibly well. And I don't see them, obviously I don't expect them to finish personally where they are now, but I don't see this becoming a thing where Forest now go on an awful run. Like
I don't think that could happen. They're too good defensively.
They're too solid, and they're just too well set up. And as you say, that foundation is there absolutely. So yeah, big fan of Forest. For the defenders, it feels like if you own them, keep them. I don't necessarily think I'd target them because the fixtures are a mixed bag. And I think especially defensively, as much as they are good defensively, they will concede chances. I mean, 0.44 XG is what they conceded in this game, though. It's another really solid defensive performance. So if you've got an Olorani, you absolutely keep them. If you've got a Sells, same again. But I'd rather target Kirkes, Robinson, Munoz in terms of upcoming fixtures. On Villa, Rodgers had another 90 minutes, another very decent game.
Unai absolutely loves him.
He does.
This is good.
And I think there's just at some point you just say he is so nailed on at the moment. Like he might miss one game, but it's only going to be one.
Do you remember the comment Unai made when he didn't get picked in the England squad for the first team? And he was like, there's no point putting him in the under 21s. He's too good. Like for a manager to go out and publicly say that in the manner in which he did, you can tell he loves him and he's pretty much nailed. Like he was meant to get dropped for Emi Buendia or rested for Emi Buendia for a game. He just plays 86 minutes anyway.
Yeah, I know. So he's had 86, 90, 90 in the last 3. Like the man is just, and this is in the busiest period of the season when he's already played loads of Champions League games. If he's not getting rested now, he's just not getting rested. So yeah, I'd feel very happy having Rodgers because the minutes are there. He had another game where he wasn't really doing much in terms of FPL. I do think he was incredibly unfortunate not to win the penalty. I'm not sure if you saw this, but the defender tugged his arm.
Oh, yeah. And they deemed it that it was not enough for him to like put him off playing the pass. But he's literally got hold of his arm. It was Elliot Anderson, right?
Yeah.
It was ridiculous.
They said it was a fleeting pull.
Yeah, no,
there's nothing fleeting about holding someone's arm and pulling it, right? And even if it is fleeting, as soon as you see that tugging motion, then that is obviously not okay. So I think that was a clear-cut penalty for me. And the thing is, Rodgers wouldn't have gone down because he was in the position to either shoot or pull it back to, I think Jian was there. So yeah, I think it was very unfortunate. But overall, I still think Rodgers is a fine hold.
I think he should be the penalty taker as well.
I'm glad you've said something. I think so too, yeah.
Because Tielemans missed his, right? So then it goes on to the next one. Watkins, the one that, so I owned him with that Flecken penalty. The one
that was a bad penalty.
That was a bad thing. And the other thing with penalties is I like people with a certain type of personality. He definitely seems to have that confidence about him. Nothing really going to bother him too much. He's a penalty taker anyway, like for the youth side. So just give it to him.
You never know. You might get the next one.
Yeah, I think you should.
Although I feel like if Duran's on the pitch, I wouldn't be surprised to see him grab it. And speaking of, the big, obviously, note for this game was that Watkins was benched after a small knock midweek. Duran starts and scores again. I don't think Watkins or Duran are options, sadly. Like Watkins, you can't spend that much money on someone that's not nailed. Duran, I would love to say go and get him, but his minutes aren't going to be secure enough because even if Duran is suddenly first choice, he's not displacing Watkins every single Premier League game. Like Watkins is too good to just sit there on the bench. So just sell Watkins for Isak. Feels like the most obvious transfer.
Did,
and if you've got Isak already, sell Watkins for Jackson. And if you don't want to do that, then go down to Chris Wood. But Isak and Jackson are sat there, and they're both significantly better options than Watkins.
One thing I'll ask you is Villa played a different system, right? They play a back 3, which means they play with wing backs.
Luka
Dean, Matty Cash, 2 favourites.
I've deliberately not mentioned either of them because they're such trolls. And I'd love to recommend Luka Dean, but I actually think them playing the back 3 suits Maatsen even more. So I would be worried that we've already seen 2 times recently that Luka Dean's been benched, and both of them have been for easier games. So I worry that in the easier games where you actually really want them, you've got Maatsen there. I mean, Matty Cash, just not a good footballer really, particularly. No disrespect to him, but I wouldn't want to own him in FPL. So I'd probably say no to both. But Villa's defensive data hasn't been bad this season. So
if they persist with the back three when the fixtures get better,
then absolutely.
Torres, Ezri Konsa,
absolutely
nailed for minutes. So that's just something I would consider. At the moment, they really don't look great at the moment. And I don't want to criticize too much, but I'm not a huge fan of a couple of things in their attack. So I'd say apart from Rodgers, just
yeah,
stay
exactly.
away.
And I probably wouldn't look to buy Rodgers right now. It's just if you own him already, then
especially when AMAD Diallo exists, we'll come
exactly. We will move on to him and Enzo, who I'm a big fan of. So the next game was Brighton 1, Palace 3. Another good game for Palace. So they had 5 big chances, 2.42 XG created. Brighton only managed 2 big chances and 0.8 XG. I wouldn't say that's completely reflective of the game I watched. I think for the first 25, 30 minutes, Brighton were actually very good. If they'd have tucked away a couple of their chances, then especially João Pedro set up Matoma on the volley. You need 1 goal there, and it's a slightly different game. But what did you make of it? And what do you make of Brighton and Palace at the moment?
So I'm really liking what I'm seeing from Palace, and this is why I'm so bullish on getting the assets in 19. Even Oliver Gazan spoke about how in the middle they're being more compact, and they have been so, right? Brighton did a similar thing to what they did away at Leicester, whereby instead of having like super wide wingers, they are allowed to come inside a little bit more, and the width can be provided by the fullbacks, almost forming a line of 5 or 6. However, that's fine against the back 4, especially when you develop numerical superiority, and then you can make chances from that. But against the back 5, especially a flat one, and Palace were often in a 5-3-2, they have so many men in the middle, it becomes very difficult to get those small space combinations go, especially when a 9 like João Pedro isn't stretching the last line at all. Rather, he wants to drop in and ball to feet and receive, right? So they did a great job nullifying them of making any real big chances. And on transition, they have that threat. When Eze drops deeper to receive, Sarr, and especially the wing-backs, the sequences that I was seeing from them were good. They would start in the middle, they would get it going with the pivot, but there was always that release on into the wing-backs, if not into like Sarr or Eze dropping into those half spaces and slightly deeper. So I'm really, really like what I'm seeing, and I think they should only really get better, right? Also, we've got Adam Wharton to come back.
Yep, exactly.
Eddie Nketiah was great when he came off the bench. If they can all find some form and push each other to get better and better in that front line, I'm not going to say they're going to do the same as towards the back end of last season, because Elise is somewhat irreplaceable. I think that definitely had a negative effect on them losing him, but I think they could do very well. In terms of Brighton, I have a very different view on João Pedro. I'm super comfortable holding him.
Yep.
I think at his price, such a good asset. And he's such a good player anyway, similar to Cunha. He will generate returns, which he probably shouldn't, right? And look at the goals Cunha scored, just screamer after screamer, right? And I think João Pedro in his own way will produce, for example, the assist, which he could have had for Matoma. And I think Fabian Hertzler's tried a few things. So he tried this. He tried a back 3 where Matt O'Reilly played on the right side of the 10 against Fulham, and it hasn't really worked. But he's shown that flexibility, and he's shown how good of a manager he is, that I think he'll find a solution. And from there, João Pedro will get going again.
Yeah, on João Pedro, I feel like when I'm watching him, he's better as the 10, which is a strange thing to say, because often you want a player to be as close to goal as possible.
I agree.
I just think, especially with Welbeck in the team, he looks so much better bouncing off Welbeck. But even when Ferguson came on, I just liked what I saw a bit more in terms of him bouncing off that. He's just not a 9. Even if he plays as the 9, you'll see like he dropped in and Jorginho Ruta was pushing forward to the 9 role a little bit more. So I think Hertzler will note this as well, that you just need one of Welbeck or Ferguson starting. Hopefully it's Welbeck soon, because I think that's their best combo. I agree with you on Palace, by the way. Munoz obviously picked up his 5th yellow card, so he is suspended for Arsenal, which is honestly, I think, best case scenario, because that's the tough fixture anyway. So from 18 onwards, there's no risk of suspension. He had a goal disallowed in Gameweek 17, 4 big chances in 4 games is a joke for a defender. And he's had 6 shots in the box. I know they've obviously got Mitchell, who got the assist for this. I think he got 11 points. Didn't he? Did he get 2?
I'm not sure. I'm not. I think because he got the clean sheet he kept. Because he got off a little bit early.
I think that was it. I saw him with the 11-pointer, but
No, I think he got one. I think he got one. It was because he came off a little bit early.
His data was really good in that game. 0.47 expected assist.
Unreal assists, by the way.
Yeah, by the way, he's got an excellent delivery, and I think quite underrated. But across the season, 0.12 expected assists. There's a conversation, of course, but I just think Munoz is the standout for me, unless you're going super different for this, not for the sake of it, but let's say your mini league leader's got Munoz, or you just want to go a bit different, go for Mitchell, but Munoz has got to be the standout.
One thing with Mitchell, and I think you actually make a great point because I hadn't considered him. Saka used to suffer from this thing whereby, because he wasn't so extroverted, at least on the outside, people perceived him as a little bit humble, maybe didn't give him the credit he deserved.
Yep.
Charlton seems to have that similar tendency where he doesn't seem the loudest character,
Just does his job.
He does his job, and he does it very well. So he could probably continually pick up returns and people not really take notice, but I think you should, and I think it's good that you've alerted people to him.
Yeah, I've just checked. He's 4.8 million as well, so it's not like he's up at 5, and it's just like just a thought. Especially if maybe let's say you wait a few weeks and Munoz starts to go up to like 5, 5.1. I'd need to see so much from them. I mean, Henderson's in great form. I should just know, like the saves that he made in that game were exceptional. In the last few weeks, Henderson's looked really good,
and he's cheap. He's a lot cheaper than the rest of them.
Yeah,
that's what I'm looking at.
I feel like if I were to double up,
triple up.
Can you imagine triple up on Palace?
I mean, people have been tripling up on Arsenal.
I might triple. I might go Henderson, Glasner, and Munoz. No, but I think if I were to go double, it would be Henderson and Munoz, which I don't mind. But let's see how Palace get on in the next few. Just the only other player you sort of mentioned him from a footballing perspective, but let's talk about FPL here, is Malassar. Really interesting option. 17-pointer. And I know people are going to say this is massively knee-jerk, and let me tell you it is massively knee-jerk, but he's been putting up really good data now. 0.52 non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90. He started the last 8 Premier League games in a row. He's only 5.7, the same price as like Iwobi, Semenyo. Is he an option?
One thing I like about him is he's Premier League proven. Do you remember at Watford? This guy was a baller. Yeah, he's a baller. So
I owned him definitely for points when he was playing there. Yeah,
and he's got, I would say, the physical characteristics, not only to survive in this league, but somewhat thrive as well. I think playing in this system as one of the 10s, when it's going well, is fantastic. There's such high upside to playing in this type of role. When it's going badly, it's really rough. But when it's good, it's great. And yeah, I actually think if he can, because I don't really see who his competition is on that right side, unless he wants to play Eddie Nketiah in that right side role. But he's a 9 at the end of the day. As good of a player as he is, I think it's more impactful having him coming off the bench.
They tried it a little bit earlier in the season, having Nketiah in that front line, and it just didn't really look particularly fluid. And that was when Mateta was struggling. Yeah. And I just think it's Mateta or Nketiah, I think, or bringing Nketiah on as a super sub, yeah.
I think the only way that also gets facilitated is if Eze finds some form. And I love him as a player. But one thing I've seen with him recently is just my personal observation. I feel like he doesn't have as much swag in his step. Normally such a cool player to watch, but doesn't have that at the moment. So I think if he's not going to get that back, then I prefer Ismail Assar. It offers you a different dynamic as well.
And I think the thing with Eze is you had 2 things in recent times which are amazing, which is penalties and all set pieces. He's sharing a couple of set pieces. Will Hughes has taken a few.
And when Wharton comes back as well.
And when Wharton comes back. And he's not on... Well, he's not definitely first choice penalty.
I don't think he'll get them. I think Mateta, especially because he scored, and he seems like the type of guy that wants to take it. Just like give it to the number 9.
So at that point, are you talismanic? You're not first choice penalty taker. You're not taking all of the set pieces. He's still a great footballer, but I see a lot of people like, I want Eze, and I've been considering him, but I think Sarr, Munoz, Henderson, maybe Mateta are probably the 4 assets that I'd have.
You make a really good point as well about the talisman and also the role that he's playing, because the people who are breaking on the last line, which is very important for FPL because they're going to be on the one to the end of things, or it's more likely to be Sarr or even one of the wing backs, if not Mateta, right? And if he's coming in deeper into that left half space and receiving from there, that's not great for FPL. It can be great for him and for Palace, but not great for FPL.
And I know he's come back from injury, but since injury, he's got 64, 75, 71, 59. Before that, for the first 9 games of the season, he played 90 in all of them. So maybe it's purely they don't want to risk a re-injury. But could it also be that...
Yeah, that's a good point about the injury.
But could it also be that he's just not as important, but they're not as over-reliant on him maybe, and that Glasner's trying to find a way to not be over-reliant on Eze, because I think that would benefit them as a team. So
one thing I would say is the points dodging in those first few weeks was insane. Like I only owned him for like 1 week, I think, but I got so lucky. It was ridiculous, the points dodging there.
I agree. Right, let's discuss a game that I'm very happy to talk about, which is Man City 1, Man United 2. I listened to Gary Neville's sort of podcast where he does after the games, which I absolutely love, and he summed it up really well, which was there was just a lack of quality from both teams. Right,
it was a poor game.
It was a really poor game,
standpoint.
And it was a poor game for 87 minutes or whatever. It's 86 minutes. Then it all came alive, and the result was obviously incredible if you're a United fan. I think Man United were poor as well, but City were extremely poor.
Yeah,
and
I think that's fair.
As a team that have just come off of winning so many trophies and so many titles, the incentive is on them, right? We've just got a new manager. We've been playing poorly for a while. We're sat in 13th place. The incentive is on them at home to bring the game to us, and they didn't. I think Man United deserved the win. Not by much, because both teams were poor, but I think overall, AMAD Diallo was just sensational.
Top.
You very rarely watch a game between 2 good teams where one player is so clearly head and shoulders above the rest on the pitch. And that was a pitch including Kevin De Bruyne, Bruno Fernandes, Erling Haaland. So I've been a little bit less keen on AMAD in recent weeks. And there was a few reasons for that, right? The first was I didn't like that he was playing right wing back. And as much as you can say he's still getting up the pitch, it's a very wide role because the 10s come inside. So he's very much hugging the touchline. He's had a lot of creativity, but very limited goal threat. And he was benched against Arsenal. So I looked at it and thought, you're getting a right wing back who gets forward a lot, but minutes aren't perfect because he's been benched in a very important game. And I also thought, you know what, there's a bit of rotation at that right wing back role. We could see Dallo go over there eventually. We know Mazraoui can play that, as he did in this game. And so I just thought limited goal threat, minutes aren't perfect. We don't know if he will continue in this role. And even then I thought, if he gets pushed into the number 10, well, then he's got to rotate with Garnacho, Rashford, Xerxes, Højlund, Bruno, who all of these players took for 3 roles.
But he doesn't if they're at home.
Mason Mount, right? So there were so many players that could play the 10 role that I thought, even if he does then get pushed forward, that's not a great thing. So much has changed. Firstly, in the last few games, he's been even better. Like, he's found even an extra gear on top of that. And on top of that, he is playing this 10 role, but the 3 players that you could rotate him with are either, again, at home or injured. So Mason Mount started the game, and I'm really gutted for him because he's been really good under Amorim, and I feel like that role is just perfect
made for him.
Yeah,
it is. It's made for him.
So he picked up an injury. You could see on his face it wasn't a good one, probably muscular again. So he's probably out for a little while. And then the other 2 players that could rotate with AMAD as the other 10, because you've got Bruno as one of the 10s, ideally, or Mount. They're a slower player. They're better with the ball at the feet. They've got that passing ability. So the other one needs to be someone that's got that dribbling ability and that pace, is AMAD, Garnacho, Rashford. Garnacho and Rashford, again, both left at home. And Amorim has made it very clear that was a tactical / he said it wasn't disciplinary.
I think somewhat.
It was. And I think he made the comment that I see what people eat. I see how they train. I see how they interact with teammates, how they dress. He's not impressed with the attitude of Garnacho and Rashford. It's as clear as that. There have been rumours that Garnacho and Rashford have been leaking the team as well. I don't know how much
we shouldn't buy
into
that.
Too much. Exactly.
We'll leave that alone.
What we will take into account is that he's not been impressed with the way they've been training. And he has said in his interview after the game, if they train better this week, they'll be back in the squad. Yeah. But clearly, a manager's just come in and left you at home in one of the biggest games of the season.
The biggest game probably that he's had. Yeah.
Exactly. So even if they come back into the squad, AMAD is head and shoulders our best attacker at the moment. And very clearly first choice. And Xerxes, he's grabbed a couple of goals, but he's been really poor on the ball.
I'm not a fan.
I'm not a fan. And he's not been very good on the ball either, which is so important in that 10 role. So I think if Xerxes does play, it's probably as the 9 instead of Højlund. So if you bring that all together, then you've got AMAD at 5.2 million now, playing in an advanced 10 role in incredible form with an incredible end product, very much first choice. And the 3 players that can rotate with him aren't real options at the moment. He's just excellent. I see very little bad things to say about him. And even the fixtures, they're not ideal, but they're also like middling. I would say Manchester United's fixtures are okay coming up.
They're pretty good. From a stacking standpoint, I think it's like Bournemouth at home, Wolves away.
Yeah, Bournemouth at home, Wolves away, Newcastle at home, Liverpool away, and then he goes into Southampton at home, and then they improve for that. So over the next 4, I think the Newcastle and Liverpool games in 19 and 20 aren't ideal. I also think Bournemouth aren't an awful defence, but we know that Bournemouth's Achilles heel is players getting in behind, which is what AMAD is exceptionally good at. So yeah, do you know what? I don't have many bad things to say about him. I'll chuck the question to you. We're going to discuss Chelsea in a second, but AMAD versus Enzo, if you were choosing fresh this week, who do you think you'd go for out of the 2?
I actually don't think it's that close. I'm going AMAD. As a Chelsea fan, I'm going AMAD.
Okay.
So we'll break it down. We'll go from the start. I think you make a very good point about the type of 10 you need, especially because let's say Bruno Fernandes doesn't play in the pivot because it's Kobe and Ugarte, who had a good game yesterday, and we can talk about that. Bruno is definitely someone, and Amorim's spoken about this, ball to feet, and he wants to receive looking towards the goal, right? Then you have Højlund, who's definitely more of a runner, and I really like Højlund, by the way. I think when United get clicking, I can't wait to see the damage he does. I even tweeted about it yesterday. I really like him as a player. So for the other 10, I think in an optimal scenario, you want a hybrid type of 10. Now, who's played there so far? Rashford, Garnacho, Mount. Rashford and Garnacho, more the runner types, but I don't think it works because I think you need another person who's comfortable ball to feet, especially when you don't have the usual style of wing backs where they can push on, right? And they're going to progress for you because they're inverted. And you also need someone, though, who can stretch the last line at the same time because you can't leave it all to Højlund. And AMAD can do both. You want him to come short and receive and function in those small spaces. He can do that and back to goal. But you also want him to stretch. He's got the pace and the physicality to do that. So I love this option. I think it's great. And the other thing I would say is United assets in general. I really like your clean sheet prospects. The game model is very low risk, right? Both with the fact that you have inverted wing back, so you're always looking to come inside really and play passes there. You've got Harry Maguire, central centre back, who I'm a huge fan of.
He had a great game, by the way.
He's great at central centre back. The agenda people run against him is it's just false in the sense that it's not true, right? Like he's genuinely a very good player. I thought Ugarte was good yesterday, and he also an interesting role in the sense that there weren't too many progressive passes. It was quite simple, and then he took things from there. So I think you could keep clean sheets, which helps for AMAD as well. I think the options are really there for Man United, and he could be absolutely brilliant.
I love AMAD so much. I'm finding it difficult because I want to try and also be objective here. I still think AMAD probably, if I was choosing a fresh this week, I might go AMAD over Enzo. But I'm also happy with my Enzo choice.
You really like your Enzo pick.
I really like Enzo. What I like about him is I think he's incredibly important to what Chelsea are doing right now. So I think his minutes are, I would argue, as secure as AMAD's. I think they're both going to start pretty much every game.
We don't have someone who can play that type of role.
Exactly.
We really should have in the squad. And it was, I guess, meant to be Drewsbury Hall, but he's just not at the level currently. Not that he's playing a bad level. I think Enzo's just playing at a good level.
Exactly. And what I also like is I think if you need this player to start pretty much every week, I think Enzo does have the better fixtures. I think there are some really nice ones in there for AMAD, but I think Enzo has the better fixtures. And then what I also like is the amount of set pieces Enzo's taking from the other side, like those in-swinging corners, in-swinging free kicks.
I've got a question for you. Yep. We've spoken a lot about Man United. Is there any consideration for any City assets, given we were all looking at this Game Week 18 fixture swing originally?
I can't. I mean, I've got Rico Lewis in my team, and I'm like, if he comes back into the 11 and they start to defend
what happens if they hit form next game? And with that fixture swing in 18, do you restructure your squad?
No. Not in a million years. Okay. And I think, like as we said, the assistant managership, you've got to find some money. Yeah. Isak performing at the level he is, I would back Isak to take on Haaland, which is a crazy thing to say.
Not necessarily for Haaland. What about Vardy or even Foden if he's playing in the 10 like he did yesterday?
No, I'm not interested in Foden. Okay. I need to see Foden 4, 5, 6 games in a row find something. Even if he got a hat-trick in the next game, I still wouldn't touch him. Gvardiol's interesting, but I like Arsenal-Liverpool defence. Yeah. So I think that leaves me Rico Lewis. And that's why I've kept Rico Lewis, because I had that in the back of my mind. Like, what happens if City do just click? Like Pep does something. He changes the formation, then just suddenly they're there. When I've got Rico Lewis, hopefully he's part of that. But yeah, not for me with Man City. But yeah, really happy. I'm still really happy with the Enzo pick. Is there anything else we want to discuss on Man City, Man United? I mean, if you've got Bruno Fernandes, he started as the 8, then moved to the 10 when Mount went off injured. I do truly believe that most of the time, Bruno will be favoured as a 10.
Okay.
And that I think the only reason he was the 8 is in a game like this, I don't think Amorim trusted Mainoo, which is a shame, but I understand why.
Had a good game when he came on, though.
Exactly. He played really well. I'm hoping, therefore, that as a result, he sees, you know what, I can trust Mainoo in a game like this. Mainoo's major issue, incredible ball carrier, really good with his back to players, really good, actually defensively, better than people realise. His long passing is pretty rubbish, which is a shame because that's the one thing that he's missing from his game. And if you watch Manchester United and you watch Amorim's football, he loves the midfielders pinging passes. And I think arguably our second or third best player since Amorim's come in is actually Ugarte, who's been very underappreciated.
I think solid. Exactly. And that's probably why he's gone on the radar. Nothing too flashy.
He can't pass either in terms of those long passes. So I think if you put Mainoo and Ugarte next to each other, you are lacking someone that can spray passes. You slap Bruno in there. Bruno's pinging passes for fun. Unreal. So I think that's why he prefers Bruno in a game like this. But largely, I think Bruno will be preferred as the 10. Do I have an issue with keeping him? No. Would I buy him? Probably not, because you've got AMAD sat there, who's got as much goal threat, and I'd rather own Isak. Like, if you're telling me you're going to have Salah, Saka, Palmer, and then an 8 million-ish asset, I'd much rather have Isak myself.
One thing on Bruno, and you make a really good point about your midfield too, right? So Mainoo's still young, and that's probably, his body hasn't probably physically developed as much as it should have by the time he's going to be playing against the rest of these guys at the required age. So that will probably come with time. And as we've spoken about, Ugarte, a lot of low-risk passes and not too many progressive ones, maybe because he doesn't have that in the locker as opposed to the instructions. So I wonder against the sides where you're going to have transition a little bit more, do you think that could hurt Bruno's output as well a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. Bruno's one of those, I keep thinking that he's just not worth it, and then he just pops up with these goals and assists.
I've said to tell him every week
and
in my comments.
I think it's the level of quality that the man has that doesn't need the best data. He's on penalties, and his passing ability is so good. I think he'll just continue to tick along really nicely and probably be good value. But again, I mean, for some of the reasons you've listed as well, I'm not sure I would go out there and buy him fresh this week ahead of AMAD. I know some people wonder, can you sell Bruno for AMAD to free up the funds to go and get an Isak? If you've got multiple free transfers, I'm not necessarily massively against it. I would just be concerned that Bruno's still a better asset, but it's just money-wise, I'll probably prefer Isak and AMAD over, I don't know, like if you tell me it's like Bruno and Strand Larsen or AMAD and Isak.
Yeah, then 100% AMAD and
then you prefer that combination. So yeah, I would be very, very tempted. You spoke about Man City. Gvardiol has been brilliant this season. 4th goal. Very fortunate with the deflection, but he's now 2nd for XGI per 90 this season out of all defenders, only behind Trent. He's 2nd for
Trent's
shots.
Still top?
Yeah, Trent's still top quite comfortably.
He's been injured as well.
But by some distance as well. Yeah.
It's probably that. I guess it was imagine the start because he racked up so much, right?
And even in recent games, he's been popping up with the odd 0.4 XA sort of games.
One,
yeah, exactly. So
Van Dijk should have helped him out.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, 2nd for XGI per 90 and also 2nd for shots in the box per 90. Only Porro has higher, and we'll discuss Porro in a second. Even at centre-back, he does carry some attacking threat, but I can't justify it. And then on Erling Haaland...
No, for me, no.
It's a big no. And it's the big no because the 3 premium mids, although they didn't deliver this week, have been so good. Isak's been brilliant, and the assistant managership, and Arsenal and Liverpool defence, and like all of these other...
And the price.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, you can't justify 14 point whatever he is, 8-9 million on him right now Even if he dropped to 14, I can't do it. I mean, even if he was 6 million, based on his performances right now, you can't justify
I'm taking him a 6.
No, I would take him looking forward. But I mean, based on his recent performances, he's getting outperformed by most of the cheap forwards. So, I mean, what would you do? I mean, is there any part of you we just spoke about this fixture, and if you still had Haaland, is there any part of you that'd be tempted?
So Haaland, no. For me, even if we get to 18 and City find form, no, because I don't have to captain him every week when Mohamed Salah exists. And as you mentioned, at that price and with everything coming down the line, it's just not optimal, right? At this point, and Andy Martin maybe was ahead of the curve a little bit. What I would say with the rest of the City assets, though, where someone like Foden is fairly accessible, especially if you're going no Haaland, and Guardiola, if Pep can find the right system for this set of players, then I think it could get interesting. One thing I've had an issue with is, and he knows infinitely more than me about football, obviously, is Gundo at the base. I think that really hasn't helped him, right? So what he does against United is he plays almost like a 2-2-2 where Guardiola goes into the pivot with him, and Nunes and De Bruyne were functioning as these really wide players. Didn't really work. The diamond against Palace wasn't bad, but didn't even really work. Grealish in the middle, I quite like because it increases the retention, so reduces transition. And he did that against Forest. So I think if he finds a system, which includes Foden at the 10, I'm actually really interested in him as a differential, potentially. And Vardy goal, as they call him, potentially as well. But outside of that, no, nothing.
I'd agree with that. Let's keep an eye on how City get on. The thing is, I don't
want to write them off, though.
I don't want to write them off, but I also don't think they're going to suddenly go from this bad to amazing. I think if they start to improve it, not transitional across like 4 or 5 games, but I think they'll win. Then they'll win a bit more convincingly, and then they'll start to find their feet. As much as I trust Pep as a manager, I don't think he's going to suddenly find something that turns this terrible performances into like 5-0 wins every single week. So I think you've probably got a few weeks to assess how they transition. The next game was Chelsea 2, Brentford 1. I'll let you take this as a Chelsea fan. What did you make of it?
Good. I'm really happy with how the side is, and I love our manager. I absolutely love Enzo. One thing he's shown so much is like this flexibility to have different solutions. For example, he starts with Benio Badiashile at right centre back against Spurs. It doesn't work. So what does he do? He moves him to left centre back, but he also brings on Malagusto, who's traditionally a fullback. He doesn't invite him. He plays him at right centre back, and then we go on to win the game. Here, he plays Malagusto again at right centre back, but he moves Cucurella almost into this diamond in midfield. So Enzo on the right side, Palmer at the top of it, but he strays to the left, and then Cucurella sometimes in like 8-like positions, hence why he scored that goal that he did, and sometimes wide. And I think in terms of the attacking dynamics, it's really good. We can sustain waves of pressure. Moises Caicedo has been one of the best players in the league this season. He's been absolutely phenomenal. And because we're able to sustain so much pressure and keep possession, and we have the quality on our side, and we've got good threat from the wings, people can say what they like about Madueke, and I get annoyed at his selfishness at times as well. And so did Palmer in the game. I saw him throw his hands up sometimes. But what you can't deny is the threat that he provides, especially one-on-one. So yeah, I'm really bullish on Chelsea, and I like what I'm seeing. It's been an enjoyable season for first time in a while.
I like Maresca because he, and this is no criticism of Amorim, and I think it's very much to do with Man United being the club they are, but he's in the media a lot. He's doing so many interviews. He's always smiling and charming and getting pictures. Maresca's just come in and done a job. Like, he's just been very, very low-key. Picked the players that he wanted to pick, made it very clear who the two teams are. Not afraid to pull players out the starting 11.
Very courageous.
He's brave, he's courageous, he's low-key. He's just a quality manager, and he's just done a very, very good job. And I like that he's lowering expectations. He's like, no, we can't win the league.
Yeah, I like that.
And I like that because I don't even think it's like defeatist. I don't think it's like poor ambition. I think it's just...
he definitely fancies us. Like you have to, right? You have to have that self-belief.
It's a reality. It's just like, don't worry. Like we've got this. We're not going to win the league. I think it's just like, just like keeping it kind of nice and calm. And I just think he's absolutely quality, as you say. In terms of from an FPL perspective, I think Jackson had another ridiculously good game in terms of chance accumulation.
Did you see the miss?
I did. It was a miss from about 6-7 yards out, open goal. 1.22 XG in this game. Nobody in Gameweek 16 could beat his 6 shots in the box. He's a monster at accumulating. This game felt a little bit more like Jackson from last year. Where it was a high quantity of chances and didn't take them. Because this season, he's been very prolific and clinical.
The finish was unreal, though.
It was an unreal finish. And this is what Jackson does. He'll miss an open goal, and then he'll score that. He's probably the second best forward for me in FPL at the moment after Isak.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, the two locks, maybe like 3 locks were João Pedro, Jackson, and Isak, and Cunha was definitely like in and around there as well. It's the fact that fixtures are so good. And I think the big thing is when you have a true creative in Cole Palmer behind you, you are always going to get chances in a game because he's just so much better than pretty much everyone else, right?
Yeah.
And I think having that and the way that him and Jackson interact is fantastic. One thing I've noticed with Jackson is, and it sounds so simple, but he passes the ball to Cole Palmer. Cole Palmer is undoubtedly our best player, especially from an attacking standpoint, right? And so just give him the ball. And I think it sounds so simple, but other players, they don't do it, not to mention any names. But Jackson does, and I think they have such a good relationship, and he's profited from that.
Absolutely. Anyone else you wanted to mention from Chelsea? I mean, we spoke about Enzo a lot. Anyone else that stands out from an FPL perspective?
If Sanchez can keep his place, he's interesting because we concede enough shots with the way we play.
Yep.
And we have certain deficiencies to our defense, which because you have to give up something, right? Whereby we'll concede enough shots and decent shots where Sanchez can make saves. So and as you know very well, he was on a 9-pointer yesterday, right? Yep. So I think he's a decent option if on the assumption you're okay with maybe one rotation. I would have said Cucurella because of the positions to get into, but hard to pick him when he's getting sent off.
Yep.
Levi Cole is good as a budget cheap option. But yeah, for me, mainly it's Jackson, Palmer, and then if you want to start talking about Enzo as well, in this role at that price, he's a wonderful facilitator alongside the likes of Rodgers and AMAD.
Yeah, FPL Harry, who's obviously a Chelsea fan, you guys will know him well. He basically messaged me this morning and said Enzo is basically Palmer in terms of positioning, but not as good and not on penalties. So, but in terms of the role, they're not the same role per se, but in terms of attacking threat and getting into good positions, Enzo's right up there a lot of the time. Like and I was watching some of the highlights. I didn't manage to catch the full game, but there was a couple of times when Cucurella had the ball, Gusto, and Enzo's getting into the box.
Yeah.
He's not sat there as like a defensive midfielder.
He's getting between the lines quite a bit. The only concern I have with him compared to the likes of Rodgers and AMAD in terms of pure attacking talent, take away everything else, they're both better attackers, right? In terms of football, right? I'm not trusting him to score as many goals as I would the other two. That's my only concern with him. I think I'd prefer to take the two assets who I think have a higher ceiling, albeit potentially a lower floor.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, as you say, that the floor is interesting because I think Enzo with the set pieces and with the fact he's playing in such a good Chelsea team, he'll tick along with little assists here and there. He'll get so many sort of 5 and 6 points, I'd imagine, but maybe won't get you those sort of 15, 20s because he's
not AMAD.
Yeah, he's not AMAD. He's not likely to get you goals and assists on a regular basis in every single game. Just on Brentford, I thought they were absolutely dominated for the first 60. Final 30, they were probably the better team, I'd say, overall. What do you make of Brian Mbeumo?
I mean, he didn't have much in that game. Sanchez made a good save of him. But in terms of him specifically, he didn't do that much. But he's quality, right? He's a quality footballer. No one's been denying that at any point this season. He's also quite young. I think he's 24, 25.
Same number of points as Saka this season.
That's insane. And they've scored so many goals. I guess now, like, some of the worst fixtures were the Chelsea game. But Forest at home isn't great, but it's Brentford at home, right? So it's almost a guarantee, like 10 goals in the game.
Yeah.
I think he could be a keep. If you've got other issues elsewhere, I think he could be a keep, especially because Bowen's had, I would say, his two best fixtures in Leicester away and Wolves at home. So I'm more inclined to potentially keep him now than I was 2-3 weeks ago.
I think it's exactly the same as I've been saying for weeks, which is if you need to free up funds, he's a good place to do it.
Yeah,
but if you don't need to free up funds, don't sell him for the sake of selling him. And I'd be pretty happy keeping him. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Final game then was Southampton 0, Spurs 5. Spurs are so unpredictable.
Yeah, I was looking at this and I was thinking, oh, you know what? It's a decent opportunity for Southampton to get something back because
I thought the same.
Yeah, because like they're not in great form.
That back line looked awful as well for Spurs, didn't it?
Ange in the media and Ange with the fans away at Bournemouth, the wheels start to feel like they're rolling off, but then they win 5-0 and put 5 past them in the half. So yeah, you never know with these lot. Honestly, you don't know with this club.
I still think Spurs were clearly from the start going to win this based on the Southampton that turned up. It's very game state. Like Southampton conceding like 37 seconds, their heads are gone.
Yeah.
Right. They're already a team that are struggling so much.
15 minutes as well kills the morale.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just like, what are you going to do? Like, I'm watching all of their fans leave the stadium. Like, there's no way to come back from that. It's so interesting. So Spurs have scored 4 goals or more on 5 occasions this season, which is the most in the Premier League, even more than Brentford, who love to slaughter teams. But they hadn't won in 3 Premier League games since beating City 4-0. Like, if you look at their results, it doesn't make any sense. There's no rhyme or reason. It's not even like, oh, they're better against low blocks or they're better. It's just completely random. I've got no sort of discernible pattern I would
say the one thing is when you have a side like Southampton, who are maybe more inclined to press them a little bit, and they allow Spurs, because Spurs overload in the front line and with the doggy, and they want to play through sides. Southampton aren't the most compacted side, so I'd say that's the one thing. And the other thing is they're just Spurs. Like and that's the thing, you just never know with them because they're Spurs.
Yeah, Maddison's been unreal. He's the 5th top scoring midfielder. Yeah. He's got 10 more points than Bruno. He's only marginally 15 points behind Mbeumo and Saka. His XGI per 90 this season is 0.73.
That's insane.
Which is unreal. And he's been putting up on a consistent basis. It's not 1 or 2 games that have skewed that. My concern is just the minutes, right? Since game week 8, he's averaging 51 minutes per game. You can't consider an asset like that. And again, I was watching above average FPL because Adam and Baker are both Spurs fans. And I was like quite keen to get their thoughts on Maddison because he feels like an asset, which why don't I own him? And then I saw Baker say, why don't we own him?
Yeah.
And then Adam was like, well, it's the minutes, right? And you keep coming back to that. And with Johnson being as good as he has in terms of output, with Kulusevski able to play as the 10 or off the right.
So good this season, by the way.
Yeah, Kulusevski's been comfortably their best player. Again, he'd be in my team of the season quite comfortably as well. But they've got options, right? They don't have to play Maddison in every game. So is there any possibility we go for him, or do we need to see him start more consistently?
Well, he's an FPL player, right? Did you see his tweet yesterday?
I did see it. Yeah. If you didn't see, he made a joke about the intended destination for the Son goal that didn't get the assist, and he was like, "But listen, my intended target."
It was a fair point. It was a fair point.
Yeah. So Maddison tweeted official FPL and said, "My intended target was Son. So what are you going to do about it?" Which is quite funny. And honestly, what are they going to do about it? They've just been told by the player himself.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
actually a really good point. Yeah,
like they should genuinely change that. They've been told by Maddison that his intended target was Son. But anyway, yeah. So what would you consider him or?
I don't think you can at these minutes. 51, I didn't realize it was so low. 51's awful.
Yeah, he's had 2 or 3 benchings in that. So 3 benchings, I think. And then a couple of early subs. It's just...
And it's awful for how good of a player he is as well. Like you would expect a quality player of James Maddison's quality to at least be around the 70-minute mark. But I guess it shows how good Kulusevski's been functioning in that 8/10 type of role. I don't think you can justify going there because of the minutes. But I guess if you have him, especially when he's in such good form, is there a real need to sell him? Probably not. Just let him tick along. And can he drop him after scoring a brace? I think it's a little bit difficult to do so. So yeah, I'd say don't buy, don't sell. Standard case.
I'd be more worried about Johnson, who's had 52 and 45 in the last 2 games. He's clearly not like, and with how good Maddison's been, it's very difficult to get them all in, which it is possible to do. But they've tried earlier in the season playing Maddison and Kulu, and it looked a bit... They lack that balance.
The one game looked really good was at Old Trafford. I just thought I'd put that in there.
I was at that game.
Oh, yeah.
I was literally at that game. It was awful.
Yeah, I remember that, actually.
Yeah.
But they were unreal that day.
I think that was still Man Utd being terrible as well. And Kulu ran the show. But I just think they do generally look better with like Basuma and Sarr, or when Bentancur's back, like 2 6s and Kulu or Maddison as the 10. I would be very tempted to sell Johnson if I owned him. I feel like it's a decent exit point now. There are some really good cheap assets we spoke about that you could go for. I'd be tempted. Pedro Porro was also on the bench for this game. It's his second in the last 3 game that he's been benched. He wasn't rested. He was dropped, and his performances haven't been good enough. Spence was unbelievable as well. And
picks up an assist straight away.
He was really good. Yeah. The saving grace is obviously Porro came on in the 28th minute and therefore got the clean sheet. And if Udogie is out injured, well then Porro will continue to start. If you're wondering what happened, Porro came on for Udogie, but Spence shifted out to left back and Porro at right back, which I found very interesting. I'm not Ange Postecoglou, but I would have done the opposite and I would have left Spence at right back. But yeah, if Udogie's out, it will be Spence and Porro. So maybe let's see what the update is on Udogie. Other than that, though, again, I would sell Porro. Like Spurs aren't great defensively. If you've got Porro, it means you've not got an Arsenal or a Liverpool defender, one of the two. And I'd even rather have Guardiola as well, I think, than Porro.
Yeah, same. I definitely would. The only thing I would say is if he ever gets on a hot streak like we saw last season.
Yeah, then get him back in.
Yeah, exactly. Because he's cheaper, right? He's cheaper than the rest. But for now, I'd say don't touch. And I think you make a good point about Johnson. And what I would add is that he's not explosive. Like if you look at all his returns, they're very consistent, aren't they? Like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Whereas Maddison's gone double digit. And I think you probably want to take players with that ceiling. So especially with how competitive it is amongst the assets because there's so many good options, I would probably be looking at getting off Johnson, like you said.
Cool. The only other player to mention then is Solanke. I feel like I'm going to die on this hill that it's just not it for me from an FPL perspective.
Completely
but
agree.
In the games this season where Spurs have scored 3 or more goals, Solanke's obviously played because in I think 1 or 2 of them he didn't play. But in the games that he's played where Spurs have scored 3+ goals, he's got 6, 6, 2, 16, which was the Villa game, 5, 6, 5. So apart from the Villa game, no more than 6 points. He never gets bonus points when he gets a return. In 2 of them, it was a single assist. In 3 of them, it was a single goal with no bonus. And then he blanked in 1 of them. Now, you could look at it instead. And the flip side is he's averaging 5.1 points per 90. Across the season, that would put him on just over 190 points. Which would be a banging season.
Huge. Yeah,
exactly.
huge.
That would be incredible. And he will play.
But it's not
reflective
reflective of the season, really.
It's not. And I just think if you look overall, like Spurs put 5 goals past them. Solanke's been on the pitch for most of the game and he gets a single assist. And the assist, by the way,
was lucky.
Opta classed it as a block shot, which it may well have been, but it wasn't a great piece of play like hold up or anything like that. It was just a block shot. I'd sell Solanke for Isak in a heartbeat. Same. And I'd arguably sell him for Jackson as well, I think.
Yeah, so I think you make two good points there. One, it was quite lucky. And the other thing is he wasn't so involved in the other goals as well, and he didn't look like getting there. What I would say about the averaging 5 points per game is a lot of that is from the Villa fixture, right? But for the first 70 minutes, it's not like he looked particularly threatening. I remember Rodgers came off and they almost just collapsed. So is that 20-minute flurry that he's had that's really helped out all of the statistics. But when you put it in context, especially because Rodgers would usually be on the pitch, if it wasn't for that like half knock, we'll call it, I don't think he'd have got that 16 pointers. So for me, this is a sell, especially when he's not getting bonus when pretty much all the other forwards are.
Yeah, I'm just looking now. So his highest points score of the season outside of the 16 pointer is 6.
Yeah, that's not good.
And
enough.
He's got that 3 times, and then he's got 3 5s, and then the rest are 2s and 0s.
Not a single 7, not a single,
not a single 7, 8, anything like that. Yeah, the only time he scored bonus points was that one game he got 3. Outside that, not a single bonus point this season. And it's because Spurs score so many goals as well. Like, if they're going to score 3 or 4 goals, someone else is probably getting 2 returns in there. So, yeah, I mean, if I had Solanke and I had other issues to put out, you have no issue keeping him, right? When Son's not on the pitch, he's probably on penalties. He is still playing number 9. His minutes are very good. The fixtures aren't bad, but I just prefer Isak and Jackson.
Yes,
the only final thing then, before we move on to some quick fire questions, is Russell Martin has been sacked. The potential new manager, I don't think it's been announced at the time of us recording this, but I've seen Potter has been...
That'd be fun.
Suited. I think that would be a really interesting one if he's willing to take it on.
They've got good players as well. They're nowhere near as bad as the league table shows them to be. So he'd actually be really interesting.
Other names, Moyes is another one that you will know of.
Oh, he's coming back.
Yeah, potentially. I think he's third most likely. We've got Corberan as the West Brom manager at the moment. So if they plan on...
Wasn't he considering going to Wolves or something?
Yeah, and I think considering they might be going down back to the Championship, that's very likely. You want a manager that you think can function quite well there. And also Robbins, ex-Coventry as well, looks like a very good shout. And I think arguably he might be their best shout, to be honest. There's also names like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and stuff like that. But let's see what happens. They might have a new manager bounce against Fulham. We might regret bringing in Robinson, but I'm not too stressed. The game against Bournemouth West Ham, we've obviously not seen that at the time of recording this, but let's see. The likes of obviously Semenyo, Kluivert, Bowen, Kirkes, Howson, all looking really, really decent.
Maybe Kudus, about like 6'2", 6'3"
exactly.
price
Like,
tag.
there are genuinely a lot of assets. I'm really looking at those cheap Bournemouth defenders, though, especially Howson, 4.3. He's had really good goal threat. He looks relatively nailed on. Senesi's out for 4 to 5 months is the early estimation. Could be a while. So he's offering some really good value along with Anderson, I think, at that cheap price.
The only thing I'd say about Bournemouth's fixtures, obviously you're not bringing him for this week, you're bringing him for the next. So I'd say the fixture run extends for 4 weeks, but one of them includes Man United away. And I actually don't think the fixtures are that good. I also think their defense is one which is slightly susceptible to conceding more than others. And I wouldn't say the attacking threats there in abundance. Like, obviously, he's been good from corners, but one of them was against Spurs, and that was an awful bit of defending. And Spurs have notoriously been bad at defending set pieces. Not everyone's going to be that standard. Kirkes is fine. I'm just not super bullish on the clean sheets, I would say.
I would definitely back Fulham defenders, probably.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I love what Mark Silva and Nuno's done this season.
Absolutely. Cool. Right. So some quick fire questions then. Most of these we've covered, but it's just to sort of get your concise, brief answer on it. So there are 6 in total. So for each one, no longer than about 5 to 10 seconds to answer. You can just go one word if you want to. You ready?
Yep.
Cool. Enzo or Ahmad if you have to choose only one?
Ahmad.
Best captain for Gameweek 17?
Oh, this is like a whole pod in itself. Palmer.
Interesting. I think Salah. Maybe we'll discuss that in a bit more detail in a second. Best cheap defender to buy in Gameweek 17?
Robinson.
Would you sell Jackson to Isak for free?
No, not this week.
Favorite forward to buy below 7 million?
Chris Wood.
And then Gabriel or Trent if you have to transfer in one this week. Very, very nice. Very quick. Awesome. Cool. On captaincy then.
Yeah.
I saw your team. I wondered if you'd have just sort of left the armband.
It was conscious.
Okay. So I think it's relatively clear cut for me for Salah. So what is it you think about? Do you just think Everton are due a pay deal? You think you like the fixture for him? What is it?
So one, I haven't given it too much thought, right? Okay. I normally do that on Tuesday night when I kind of go through it. So that's the first thing I'd say. I think there's a lot of obvious positives for Salah. The one thing that holds me back at the moment is off a 5-0 win, finding some form, dropping, like they drop points at Newcastle, they drop points against Fulham. I'm somewhat cautious that without Konate, they might suffer a little bit. And I think they're due a little bit of a downswing, just a little bit.
Yep.
And Spurs away is not easy. Like, for whatever conditions they present, however optimal they are for Salah, they're still a better side than Everton, right?
Yep.
So that's where I'm going at the moment. I think Palmer will have a lot of the ball against Everton, and he won't be maybe pressed as aggressively as other teams have done. Like, for example, Brentford did a little bit. So that's my thinking as for now. But it could easily change, and there's every chance I end up on the Egyptian by the deadline.
I respect it. I think I'm backing Everton defensively more than Spurs. It'd be very Spursy to win 5-0 and then get beat like 7-0.
One thing I would say is I don't think they were unbelievably good against Arsenal. I thought it was Arsenal just suffering from a lack of execution. I think their block could have got penetrated at times.
Absolutely. Okay, it'd be interesting. I think there is a discussion to be had. And I do think the game against Everton suits Enzo and Palmer more than Jackson. I think they'll be able to get on the ball around the edge of the box as well. So guys, as you all know by now, FPL Therapy is sponsored by Club, the wonderful free-to-play fantasy football mobile game. And in each episode, we get our guest to hopefully pull us a highly rated player that will improve our club. So if I just show you my club at the moment, it's actually coming along very nicely. So the things that I love about it, Saliba and Raya, double Arsenal defense, the front line with Gordon, Jimenez and Jackson, with the fixtures that they've got coming up. The fixtures this week for Jimenez against Southampton, Gordon having a great fixture, Jackson continues to look fantastic. And honestly, the midfield's looking pretty good for this week. All right, I've got double Fulham and double Newcastle, right? They've both got good fixtures, but it is still the midfield that I'd like to just have more options. I pulled Bernardo Silva recently, but I just don't have that squad depth. So I'm going to hand you the phone. You're going to meet now.
Midfielder?
I'd like a midfielder.
Is Salah classified as a midfielder?
Palmer? No, I think it's a forward. Okay. I think maybe like a Bruno Fernandes would be pretty fantastic. Okay. So basically, click the meet now, let me know the player, and hopefully it's a good one.
All right, it's not a midfielder.
Okay.
So, off to a bad start.
Give me their rating.
Okay, what rating would you be satisfied? Not over the moon, but satisfied.
80 would be nice.
All right, well, it's higher than that.
It's higher than that? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I shouldn't have told you that. Okay.
No, do you know what? That makes you top of our leaderboard. That is the highest rated player that anyone's pulled on FPL.
No one's higher than 80.
80 is the highest.
Well, then it's going to take some beating. It's considerably higher than that.
Considerably?
Yeah, how many points do you think is above that rating?
Is it gold?
It is gold.
So it's an 84?
Yeah, it is an 84.
Okay, what position?
Now, if I tell you that, it becomes too easy. Super consistent. Club captain.
Club captain?
Or at least he's the captain. Maybe not club, but he's definitely the captain.
Oh, no, I'm not going to be able to guess this.
You don't own him and I do.
I'm trying to think who you own in your team now. I can't think.
He plays tonight.
Is it Jarrod Bowen?
Yes, Jarrod Bowen.
Oh, okay. That's actually fantastic. That is going to put me considerably over my salary cap. Basically, I'm in debt. Right, I'm going to sign Jarrod Bowen. Okay, as you can see then, so that puts me 3 million over my salary cap. So I'm going to have to release a player. No, I'm just going to release Bernardo Silva.
Okay, you're just picking him up.
I'm going to do it right now. He absolutely stinks. That's actually put me under my salary cap. Jarrod Bowen is beautiful for the upcoming games. You've smashed that, mate. You are comfortably top of the leaderboard. There we go. If you want to check out Club then and hopefully pull some highly rated assets like Jarrod Bowen, please do click the link down below in the description. Or if you're watching this on social media, click the link in my bio and that will take you to check it out. If it's available in your country, you can just download it now. Otherwise, you can join the waiting list. And yeah, that's an insane pool. I appreciate that.
No worries, man. You're welcome.
Cool. Right. The next game we have is the prediction game for FPL Therapy. So if you are new to FPL Therapy, again, please consider subscribing. But the guest basically provides us with 3 differentials for the upcoming game week below 10%. In game week 16, Jack predicted Sancho, Solanke, and Barnes. He's had an absolute stinker. Sancho blanked, Solanke with the 5 again, and then Barnes didn't start the game. I mean, Spurs won 5-0 and Newcastle won 4-0. So it could have been very big if it had picked some other players like Murphy or Maddison, but he didn't. So in terms of the leaderboard, it stays as it is. I am still first and second in my own.
Very humbly.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's terrible, really. So we need some guests to absolutely tear it up. So your 3 players, we'll start with the one that's actually not played in game week 16 yet. It's playing tonight, and we sort of briefly mentioned him a second ago, which is Kudus. 2.5% got Brighton at home. Do you like this matchup for him?
Yeah, dude. Jack got the karma for the pack opening, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Exactly that. Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, I like what I'm seeing at the moment from West Ham, just in sense of Kudus particularly. I also think Brighton are going through a little bit of a rough patch. And if that is to continue with a player of his quality, there's points on the board. He could have had a brace last game, right? Could have had a huge haul. And when he's that good, and I've seen the capabilities to haul big, I thought it'd be a decent option to go there.
Okay, I like that one a lot. Second one, again, a player we didn't really discuss in the Fulham section, but Iwobi, who I think this is the perfect entry point for him, even if not in the differential game, even if you're buying him right now, right?
Yeah, so this was the one I was slightly concerned about because of the new manager bounce. And I wouldn't say he's the most explosive player ever. However, he's had a fantastic season and a fantastic FPL season as well. If you owned him from the start, you're laughing at his price, right? Yeah. He's been unbelievably good. So I looked at the fixtures and I was like, okay, I'll have a bit of the Fulham Southampton game. I don't want to take Jimenez in case he's benched for Maniz, otherwise I'd be all over that. Smith Rowe is obviously above 10%. So basically just left me with Iwobi for secure minutes.
Yeah, very secure minutes this season. Cool. And then the final one is I love this. Rasmus Højlund, 1.6%. Bournemouth. We spoke about Bournemouth very vulnerable with runs in behind. It's a perfect game for him.
Yeah. Also, not even just like runs in behind, but specifically from those central areas. And I think maybe slightly biased because I like him so much as a player. And it was an opportunity for me to pick him. So I thought, why not?
Yeah, I love Rasmus Højlund. I do think he's going to do really well. When I did the Manchester United shoot few months ago.
How was that, by the way?
It was incredible. Yeah. But Rasmus was the one player whose shirt I wanted signed. So I got a signed shirt from Rasmus because they basically said to me, like, you can't get signed shirts by every player. Like, it's too busy. And I was like, I'll get one from Rasmus then. I really rate him. I feel very similarly, like, of the new young players we've brought in recent years, like, he stands out to me as give him the right manager and system and he'll perform very well.
You've got a good crop in terms of their attitudes as well. He seems like a super hard worker, super focused.
Exactly.
Kobe's definitely on that vibe as well.
AMAD
as well. And then you've got like a really good captain in Bruno. I think Bruno's a top guy. Like, people give him a bad rep in the media, but given how coaches speak about him, how players speak about him, what I see as well, I think he's top. And I could see the project doing decently well if you have a good window. Yeah,
we need a good window. We need to trust Amarim and he's in the scouting that he does as well. Absolutely. Cool. Right. Final section. Then we'll move on to our sort of game week 17 teams. We've both made the transfer already to bring in Robinson. So you've got now 1 free transfer and 0.5 in the bank. So to read out your team for those on audio, you've got Sanchez in goal against Everton away, a backline of Hall against Ipswich away, Gabriel against Palace away, and Robinson against Southampton at home. Your midfield 4 is Saka, Palmer, Salah, obviously all with away fixtures this week. Armband currently on Palmer, and then Bowen against Brighton at home. And then your front line is João Pedro against West Ham at home, Jackson against Everton away, and Isak against Ipswich away. So you've got Rodgers on the bench at the moment, and you've also got a bit of backup there with Lewis Dunk as well. So I'll turn it to you. Do you have any plans to use the second transfer this week? And if not this week, where are you sort of planning moving your team going forward?
Yeah, so I don't have any plans to use it this week. And even if I heard Jackson might have picked up an injury doing a celebration.
I heard that. I haven't seen anything concrete reported, but yeah, maybe that's something to monitor.
And if it is, I'm not selling him, not for this week, because I think that'll function as his rest game week. And Rodgers at home to Man City is a decent stylistic matchup, and he's just a good player anyway, right? So I'd happily play him. I'm really looking at gearing these free transfers in one specific way. I'm going to use a lot of them before game week 20 and in 19 to target Palace assets and maybe as an exit route for Bowen. And then from 20 to 24, I'm going to roll so that I can be ultra aggressive from 24 onwards for the rest of the season. Rotating the managers within the assistant managership, having a good team for those weeks, and then just setting the team up for that period.
Yeah, we've got very similar teams in terms of the structure and personnel, and I've got a very similar idea of let me get my team in a good position. I want to remove, I've already got rid of Aït-Nouri, I want to get rid of Cunha, I need to get rid of Lewis. And then once we've made the couple of transfers we're planning,
you can leave it.
Unless there are issues that crop up with injuries and random rotation, but largely our teams are there. And then, like we said, there is that fixture swing around 24, 25 where we might want to jump off of certain assets. So yeah, I've got a very similar plan. So my team is Sanchez in goal. Backline is Gabriel against Palace away, Robinson against Southampton at home, and Trent against Spurs at home. Not a great fixture for Trent, but he's a premium defender that has such great attacking threat. You just play him in pretty much every game. My midfield 4 is currently Palmer, Salah, Saka with Salah with the armband. I've got a choice to make between Enzo and Rodgers, which on paper at first I was like, Enzo. And I did say, I do think that because Everton will sit a little bit, it will give Enzo the ability on the ball to create and potentially take the odd shot from outside the box,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well.
And you'd imagine as a result, there might be a lot of corners in this game, so maybe a set piece. So I like Enzo. I do stylistic. I like that matchup between Rodgers and City. Like if I was to predict the Chelsea-Everton game right now, 1-0, 2-0 is kind of the vibes it gives me based on what we've seen recently. City Villa could be 3-3.
Yeah, the other thing is, one thing I've seen Guardiola as good as he is, he's had a few bad games this season. And that's one reason I think he got dropped to Anfield and Ake was meant to do a job on Salah one-on-one. Yep. But Rodgers, if they to play that system, Rodgers plays on the right and has a go at Guardiola, I think you could get some change out of him. So yeah, I personally would actually play Rodgers and spread your risk because you got Palmer as well.
Yeah, that is a temptation. So I've got that choice between Enzo and Rodgers. I'd love to let me know in the comments what you would do there. And then the front 3 at the moment looks great. It's Cunha against Leicester away, Ipswich against Isak against Ipswich away, and João Pedro against West Ham away. We expect Cunha to be banned. Again, I've got nothing at the time of recording, but based on that, I need to sell Cunha or play Enzo and Rodgers and deal with Cunha next week. There's no need to do that because unless Cunha's banned for one game, which I think is unlikely, I don't even want Cunha moving forward anyway. So I need to sell Cunha, and waiting a week does nothing to benefit me really. So I think I will still have that benching addict between Enzo and Rodgers and sell Cunha. In terms of how much money I have in the bank, I've got 7.8 million, so I can't get to Jackson.
You've got 7.8 million in the bank? Oh.
No, sorry, if I sell Cunha.
Yeah, I was going to say.
How have you got that?
Yeah.
No, yeah, if I sell Cunha, I've got 7.8.
To be fair, I saw, I was doing the space and someone was on it, top 1K, 5.1 million in the bank. And he's had that for a few weeks, which is a joke.
It's a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I certainly do not have that. I think, I've got 1 million in the bank right now. So yeah, up to 7.8. So I can't get Havertz, but we've spoken about probably not the one right now. I can't get Jackson anyway because I own Sanchez. But even if I didn't own Sanchez, I still don't have the funds to get there. And Mateta, I am worried about that very early sub, and the entry point isn't there against Arsenal and Bournemouth. So I don't think I can move there unless I played Rodgers instead. But then that feels like, why am I making a transfer to then bench the asset? So it's Chris Wood. I think at the moment is the plan, which is pretty gutting for me because I don't want to bring him in that much. Yeah, it is a bit boring. So I think it's Chris Wood coming in. It's Brentford this week, which is actually a really nice matchup for him. Brentford have been shipping goals. Even at home, when they are better, they still concede a lot of chances to the opponent. So I quite like Chris Wood. Outside of that, I'm looking at the likes of Eva Nilsson, Wissa. Maybe the fixtures aren't quite as good. They don't have the penalties, but they are still really good assets. Yeah.
I can get on board with Wissa. As the fixtures, as we lose some of the bad ones, we start to get closer to the good ones. They're also somewhat fixture-proof. Exactly. Somewhat, not super.
Great underlying data on Wissa, yeah. So that's a possibility, but I think it probably is at the moment going to be Chris Wood. I have looked at the ability to sell Sanchez down. I'd have to go to a 4.3 goalkeeper.
Ooh, can't get Hendo.
I can't get Hendo sad. I'm just short on that, and then Cunha up to Jackson. So if I decide, you know what, I really don't want Chris Wood, it has to be Jackson. It would give me triple Chelsea attack, but I could sell Sanchez down to anyone 4.3, which basically means starting Fabianski most of the time. And then I can sell Cunha to Jackson. And then in the future, I can look at trying to free up some funds, then bring in a better goalkeeper. But then I'm planning future moves for a goalkeeper. I have to take a -4 this week. I lose Sanchez just to get Jackson instead of Chris Wood.
So I've got a question for you with your team.
Yep.
I've been pretty opposed to the 2 cheap midfield structures. How long are you keeping this in your squad, do you think? Rodgers and Enzo? Because essentially you don't get to rotate them as much. You almost have to play.
Yeah.
Alongside Jabba.
The plan was actually Eze. So I've been eyeing up Eze for a while as that sort of nice price point. Bring in for Rodgers, keep Enzo, and then rotate Enzo and Eze. I've not been impressed with Eze. And also, I don't really love any of the midfielders between sort of 5.5 and 7.
They're not that good at the moment.
Exactly. So I'm just thinking I'll probably keep Rodgers and Enzo. And actually, Enzo and AMAD don't rotate badly. So I'm wondering if I free up a transfer at some point. And if AMAD continues at this rate, he's like a 7-8 million asset that's priced at 5.2. So even if AMAD goes up to 5.5, I think Rodgers to AMAD at some point's on my mind. But I think until at least 24, when I've got the assistant managership out the way, which I think I'm going to play it then, once Trent's had his double, I then might look to pivot out of Trent and to then bring in a slightly better midfielder. But I agree, this setup is fine for now. It's heavily reliant on Enzo, AMAD, Rodgers continuing to deliver. And if they don't, then I'm losing points.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
That's good.
That's it, mate. We've been talking for ages. I think that's almost 2 hours. Might be the longest pod yet. But
us 10 is a good sign.
Yeah, no. Thank you very much for coming. I really enjoyed a lot of your insights. I think a lot of people will. Let me know in the comments if you did. But I think a lot of people appreciate the footballing insights as well, which is what I like about following your YouTube and also you on Twitter as well.
Yeah, no, I had a great time. It was really fun, and no cuts, just flowed as well. So it was really good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was one entire take. There was absolutely no cuts there, which is pretty impressive
for 2 hours.
For 2 hours, exactly. And please do check out his channel down below. I will link it. Just like I said, you can tell from today, just very unique insights and content, and always nice to just understand football a little bit better as well. And I've definitely learned a thing or two as well today, which is really, really good.
And I enjoy the data dynamic as well.
Exactly.
Good balance.
Yeah, no, I think that exactly. I think there was a good balance. But thank you for coming on. Thank you for watching and listening. If you are listening on audio, please rate 5-star. If you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe. Please drop a like and drop some sort of comment down below to feed those algorithm gods. Until next time, thank you very much. Bye-bye.